Coming up next, the Bookening reads Bridge to Terabithia and the Little Prince. Hey everybody, welcome to the Bookening. I am Nathan. I'm your humble and obedient host. We've got Jake Metzel. He's the pastor who's the master of reading.
That's me.
It took me a second to pull it.
Yeah.
And Brandon's done like a Doctor Who kind of a thing where he turns into someone else. And that person is...
Who?
Benjamin Sulzer.
Could it be?
The preacher who's the teacher of reading.
I do.
Do you take this book to be your lawfully readed?
This is great.
Yeah, no, this is good podcasting already.
Yeah.
Listen, Ben's here because Ben loves children's books, and
I do.
He winced when I said that. I mean, I don't know if he loves children's books.
Oh, I do.
But you've read a number of them. You were a reader.
I've been a child.
You were a child at one time in your life, and you read books that were intended for you.
They were.
You've read probably more Susan Cooper, I dare say. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm just guessing. You've read more Susan Cooper than anyone in this room.
I think that's probably true. I've read a lot of...
I don't know who Susan Cooper is.
Well,
The Dark is Rising.
Famously,
like six books.
Disney made one of their worst films based on... Well, that's an exaggeration, but Disney made the Black Cauldron is based on a...
No,
I've never seen
false.
it.
Yeah. Is it not?
False. That's Lloyd Alexander.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, see? That's the kind of place that Ben can hold my feet to the fire because he actually remembers all those kinds of books.
That's the Black Cauldron from the Prydain Chronicles. No, so Susan Cooper wrote The Dark is Rising, and that resulted in some terrible cash grab. I don't know. It's not Disney. Oh, what's it called? It's some dumb kids action fantasy movie based on one of those books, and it never made it into a franchise.
There you go. Yeah, I do remember that vaguely now that you mention it.
Christopher Eccleston.
Yes. So, Ben, you've read more Newbery Award winners probably than a lot of people, or at least you've read your share.
I read my share. I read a lot of them in elementary school.
Have you read Isle of the Blue Dolphin?
Yes.
Yeah, see. Have you read The Black Arrow or The Bronze Arrow or whatever that arrow book is?
That's me. I've not read...
You just
I didn't
confused
read that
it.
crap. I read Goosebumps.
Right.
The Bronze Bow. Yes.
Yes, The Bronze Bow.
I think I remember liking that.
Have you read Maniac McGee?
No, Jerry Spinelli.
But you know the name.
But I read, you know what I did read by Jerry Spinelli?
I have read Maniac McGee.
There's a Girl in My Hammerlock. I read that one.
Oh, it's about the girl that becomes the wrestler. I remember that.
I hated that book as an elementary school student.
Should we just pull up a list of Newbery winners?
I think that this is a good way to spend our time right now.
Well, it is nostalgic. I think a lot of our listeners probably have nostalgia for this stuff. So we can open that tab for a minute. Why not?
Mrs. Frisbee and the Wrath of Nim.
I'm going to do it.
Sure.
I'm going to go all the way back to the very first one.
All right. We're going to tap out soon, though.
1922, The Story of Mankind.
No idea what that is.
The Voyages of Dr. Dolittle.
Yeah, I've read that.
The Dark Frigate.
No.
Tales from Silver Lands.
No.
Shin of the Sea.
Don't know what that is.
I don't think so.
Chinese Stories for Children by Arthur Chrisman. 1926. 1927's winner, Smokey the Cow Horse.
Nope.
Oh, who doesn't love Smokey the Cow Horse?
1928, Gay Neck, The Story of a Pigeon.
I mean, it sounds inspiring as heck. But
it's okay. Guys, we're going to get to the things that you recognize in a minute. Just stay with me.
Okay.
The Trumpeter of Krakow.
I do recognize that.
I like that one.
Yeah.
You've read that.
It's about the alchemist stone with the
Nathan, have you read
stone.
it or do you just recognize it?
I just recognize the title.
All right. So Ben,
I like that one a lot.
What's the tally here?
So far, 1-0, right?
1-0, right?
Just
Yeah. All right. Hitty, Her First 100 Years.
Heidi or Hitty?
Hitty, Hitty.
No.
I know how to pronounce the word Heidi, in my opinion.
I like throwing down on that.
I'm sorry, Jake. Did you mean Heidi?
Hitty, the girl of the Alps?
No, Hitty, Her First 100 Years.
No idea what that is.
The Cat Who Went to Heaven.
Sounds vaguely familiar.
Waterless Mountain. Young Fu of the Upper Yangtze.
I remember seeing the cover of that book and never reading it.
Invincible Louisa, the story of the author of Little Women.
No.
Oh, boo.
Dobry.
No.
Dobry.
I don't know what that is.
Who's Dobry by?
Monica Shannon, Dobry. A Bulgarian peasant boy must convince his mother that he is destined to be a sculptor, not a farmer.
Boo. No wonder we didn't read that.
Caddy Woodlawn.
Mm-hmm.
Did read
You
that.
did read that.
I think I did
All right,
too.
so we got
Caddy
2-1.
Woodlawn's really fun.
Couldn't tell you what it's about, but I just remembered.
It's stories of a tomboy.
Okay.
Roller Skates by Ruth Sawyer.
No.
What year are we in, by the way?
1937.
Okay. Okay. So we're getting to this stuff.
We're getting there.
It'll be like
guys.
the 60s and 70s. You'll probably be strong.
It's
on it.
coming. Yeah. All right. The White Stag by Kate Seretti.
That's familiar,
It's
but
familiar to
I
me
couldn't
too.
say
That's
for sure.
It could be just because of Narnia. Or
It just sounds
that,
like something,
right?
yeah.
Maybe.
All right. Thimble Summer. Thimble Summer by Elizabeth Enright.
No.
Daniel Boone by James Dougherty.
I've certainly read Daniel
Maybe.
books, but I don't know whether that one or not.
Call It Courage.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, so we're at 3-2?
I
You got to keep your own tallies,
yeah,
guys.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
So Ben's 3, I'm 2.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The Matchlock Gun.
I believe I have read that, actually. Is that the Revolutionary War kind of thing?
French and Indian War.
I'm going to say I've read it, although
Nope.
I have very little memory of it. So we're through 3. Yes.
Adam of the Road.
Yes.
Nope.
Johnny Tremaine.
Yes.
Yes.
So 4, 5?
5.
Hey, I have now entered the ring.
All right.
Okay.
All right. I'm only keeping track of my own score here.
All right.
Yeah, that's right. You just
Yeah.
keep track of your own score. Rabbit Hill
Maybe.
by Robert Lawson.
Hold on.
New folks are coming to live in the big house. The animals of Rabbit Hill wonder if they will plant a garden and be good providers. But when the new folks move in, the animals are a bit surprised.
No, I haven't.
Strawberry Girl, Lois Linsky.
Nope.
Miss Hickory by Carolyn Bailey. The 21 Balloons.
Yes. Awesome.
King of the Wind. The Door in the Wall.
Wait, Door in the Wall, who's that?
Marguerite de Angeli. Set in medieval England, this is the story of a boy who learns his own strength when he saves the castle and discovers there is more than one way to serve his king.
Man, maybe.
Oh boy, that does sound really familiar.
It does, yeah, but I can't quite claim it.
I'm not going to claim it either, but I wish I could because I think maybe I have read it.
I actually want to go back and read some of these now. Honestly.
Amos Fortune, Freeman.
I think I have. Hold on.
Amos Fortune, born the son of a king of the Atmonchid tribe in Africa. When Amos was only 15 years old, he was captured by slave traders and brought to America. Although his freedom has been taken, Amos never lost his dignity and courage. He dreamed of being free and of buying the freedom of his closest friends. By the time he was 60 years old, Amos Fortune began to see those dreams come true.
That's another one where I'm like,
I'm
I
pretty
think
sure.
I probably did, but I can't quite claim it.
Yeah, I'm
Alright.
pretty sure, but I won't claim it either.
Ginger Pie,
Nope.
Secret of the Andes.
Secret of the Andes, I've got the list pulled up too. Beat none other than E.B. White's Charlotte's Web, which is kind of like How Green Was My Valley beating Citizen Kane for the Oscar.
I've read Secret of the Andes. I'm claiming that one.
Okay. Is it better than Charlotte's Web?
I don't remember it being better than Charlotte's Web. No,
And now Miguel,
that was a book I owned and never read.
The Wheel on the School.
Yes.
Oh, wow. What are you up to now, Ben?
I think that's 8.
I'm still up. I got 5, I think.
Carry on, Mr. Bowditch.
No.
No.
Miracles on Maple Hill. When Marley's father returns home from World War II, a broken man physically and spiritually, her mother decides that the family needs to leave the city for an extended visit to Grandma's house in the country.
No.
Rifles for Wadey,
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and claim that one. I'm pretty sure I've read it.
or Waddy.
Mhm.
Waddy, yeah. Waddy needs those rifles.
Mhm.
The Witch of Blackbird Pond.
Oh, man. I think I just always looked at that one and thought it looked cool, but never read it.
Onion John.
Ooh.
These are all bringing back the vaguest of
Yeah.
memories.
His friendship with the town odd jobs man, Onion John, causes a conflict between
No.
Andy and his father. Island of the Blue Dolphins.
Yep.
The Bronze Bow.
Yep.
A Wrinkle in Time.
Yep.
It's Like This Cat.
No.
Shadow of a Bull.
No.
I Juan de Perea.
No.
Which beat the Black Cauldron, actually.
Up a Road Slowly.
No.
From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler.
Yep.
The High King by Lloyd Alexander.
Yep.
Is that in the same Black Cauldron
That's the end of the Prydain and probably the best written of them.
Sounder by William Armstrong.
Sounder. What's that?
A young black boy living in the South in the late 1800s learns the pain of humiliation and anger when his father is given an unjust jail sentence for stealing a ham from a white man. He must struggle to support his family and deal with terrible loss, but he also finds glimmers of hope.
Sounds like a barrel of laughs.
I feel like I might have read that one.
I'm pretty sure I have, but I'm not going to claim it.
Is Sounder a dog?
Sounder's a dog.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
Summer of the Swans.
Ooh. What's that?
A teenage girl gains new insight into herself and her family when her mentally disabled brother gets lost.
No.
Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim.
Oh, yeah, baby.
Never actually read it. Saw the movie.
It's awesome. Should read it.
Julie of the Wolves.
Yep.
The Slave Dancer.
Nope.
M.C. Higgins the Great.
Nope.
The Grey King.
Yes, that's Susan Cooper.
Yes, it is.
I think I read the first of her, whatever that's, The Dark is Rising.
Oversea Under Stone.
Yeah, but I don't think I made it all the way to the Grey King, so I won't claim it.
Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry.
Yes.
Of course.
Bridge to Terabithia. I
Yep.
can now claim that one. I'm up to 3 guys.
Mm.
All
I'm
right.
coming for
I
you.
think I'm on like 11 or something like
19.
The Wrestling Game. A
No.
Gathering of Days.
Mm-mm.
Jacob Have I Loved.
I don't know that I actually read it. No.
It's by Katherine Patterson.
Yep.
Okay. A Visit to William Blake's Inn.
Nope.
Dicey's Song.
No.
Dear Mr. Henshaw by Beverly Cleary.
that. I've read so many Beverly Close. Is that What's Her Face, the Brat book?
In his letters to his favorite author, 10-year-old Lee reveals his problems in coping with his parents' divorce, being the new boy in school and generally finding his own place in the
No.
world.
Beverly Cleary did like the Ramona books, right?
She did.
I've read Ramona and Beezus, but I have not read Dear Mr. Henshaw.
Yeah. Ralph, Motorcycle Ralph.
Yes, I
Yeah.
have read
Mm-hmm.
The Hero and the Crown.
Yes.
Robin McKinney.
Yeah, that's right.
McKinley. Sarah Plain and Tall.
Yes.
No.
The Whipping Boy.
Yes.
I think I started it and it was boring.
Guys, have you read Lincoln, a photobiography?
No.
Oh, I keep that on my bedside table. I look at that every night.
How can you possibly know if you've read that one? How many Lincoln photobiographies did you read?
I guarantee you, if we drive over to Barnes & Noble right now and go to the used book, we can't get rid of these to save our life section, we will find 2 Lincoln something or others.
Joyful Noise, Poems for Two Voices.
No.
Oh man, we're going into a bad period.
We're at the late 80s, about to hit the 90s. Number the Stars by Lois Lowry.
Yes.
The Giver should have won, but no.
Maniac McGee by Jerry Spinelli.
Nope.
Number 4. Shiloh.
Shiloh is a dog.
Yes. And
I think I have, but I'm not going to claim it. I just can't remember.
I feel like I've seen the
I
movie.
might have
There's a movie.
watched it, or not watched it, read it. Missing May by Cynthia Rylant.
What's that?
After the death of the beloved aunt who has raised her, 12-year-old Summer and her uncle Obie, leave their West Virginia trailer in search of the strength to go on living.
No.
The Giver by Lois Lowry.
Yay.
Read that one.
Love it.
Walk Two Moons. A Midwife's Apprentice.
Mm-mm.
The View from Saturday.
Mm-mm.
We are just, you're going to have read these as adults at this point. Out of the Dust. Holes.
Never read it. Understand the movie's quite beloved. Never seen the movie.
I don't think I have read that.
Bud Not Buddy.
Nope.
A Year Down Yonder.
Nope.
A Single Shard.
Mm-mm.
Crispin, the Cross of Lead.
Yes.
The Tale of Despero.
There's a movie, right?
Maybe. No, I guess I haven't read it.
My kids like that one, I think.
The movie or the book?
The book.
Huh.
I just see it around my house. Kira.
Mm-mm.
Crisscross.
Mm-mm.
The Higher Power of Lucky.
Word to the audience now, folks, by the way.
That's right.
Nope.
Good Masters, Sweet Ladies, Voices from a Medieval Village.
Mm-mm.
Boo.
The Graveyard Book.
Yay, maybe.
When You Reach Me.
Mm-mm.
Moon Over Manifest. Dead End in Norvell. Or Norvelt. The One and Only Ivan. My kids like that one.
Huh.
Don't
Never
know.
heard of it.
Flora and Ulysses. The Crossover. Last Stop on Market Street. The Girl Who Drank the Moon.
Ooh, nice title.
Hello, Universe. Merci Suarez Changes Gears.
Ooh, garbage title.
New Kid, When You Trap a Tiger. And that's my complete list. So I don't know if we have a 2021 winner yet.
Yes, on Wikipedia, The Last Cuentista. No more Cuentistas after this, guys.
All right.
The last
Glad to hear
one.
it.
Okay, so I got 5. I don't know how y'all did, but I feel pretty good about myself.
I feel like I've been soundly thrumped by Ben because I lost track, but I was at 14 or so, I think.
I have 24.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, folks, that's a long way of proving why.
The power of reading.
Yeah, the power of reading. And
We've gone out of our way to establish Ben's credibility, and all that proves is we're insecure about him being here instead of Brandon.
I'm not a scholar. I'm not the scholar who's a baller of reading.
Right, but you are the baller of many things that don't rhyme with scholar.
Yeah, cool.
And you are a baller scholar who's a baller of you are a scholar in your own right.
Sure.
Just not a scholar of
Sure.
reading necessarily, but you've read a lot of Newbery.
I have.
And
it's true.
arguably more than Brandon. In fact, I can almost guarantee you've read a lot more than Brandon. Anyway, Brandon's not here, man. So
All right.
we're talking about The Little Prince, and we're talking about, I can't even remember.
Bridge to Terabithia.
Terabithia. And folks, I dare say this is, let's just rip the Band-Aid off, not going to be a love fest. Maybe I will try to stick up for Terabithia.
I think that Terabithia has some
stick-upable.
Some qualities that are worth sticking up for or creating space for. I'll argue 1 point, and that's that the death and the aftermath of the death at the end, spoilers, by the way, is pretty realistic and visceral in its ability to capture just the surreal confusion around untimely deaths, especially as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it captures the kind of weird, surreal, boring kind of feeling of just being in a house with a bunch of serious people who are whispering their own little stories and
not able to process it, not able to make sense of it, being angry at the person who died for dying, being angry and taking it out on people, not knowing what you're even doing or saying,
right,
feeling lost. All those types of things are captured really well, and for good reason. It's based on a true story of her son losing his best friend.
Yeah.
Right? So
she was very observant.
I think that's about what it amounts to. She was a good observer of her son's grief and her own, and did a good job capturing it. And that's essentially what makes this book beloved and why some people have really connected to it, and in my opinion, but I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, well, we'll litigate it. Ben, you're going to give us context on both Katherine Peterson and the Little Prince,
Who's
right?
Katherine Peterson?
Or is that another name? Patterson?
Patterson,
yeah.
But we don't have Brandon here to do context, so
no. So here I am.
Yeah.
Katherine Patterson was born in China to Presbyterian missionaries, and at some point later, before she started writing, was herself a Presbyterian missionary to Japan. If you ask me what kind of Presbyterian and if she's a sincere Christian, my response is that she said in an interview that one of her favorite writers ever is Marilyn Robinson, who wrote Gilead, and she found Gilead to be a really awesome experience. And
a book so great that on this very podcast, I wanted to talk about it, but oh boy, I fell down a hole or something, and the Mysterious Phantom showed up for 3 episodes to talk about that book, which I don't think has actually ever happened before or since, that the Mysterious Phantom has so thoroughly taken over a series of episodes. Maybe I'm wrong about
not
that.
Not quite like that, but he has shown up from time to time.
Yeah, he shows up from time to time, although I think the last time we saw him was several years ago and he was dead.
So killed him, yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that he was dead.
I don't know. He seems to have
crossed over a little bit.
Yeah, made some cameo appearances.
Not quite dead yet.
Various places.
He's made some cameos. You can find him in some other feeds. Although, arguably, he ended up dead in that particular story, as I recall. Didn't it have a little ironic twist at the end? It was a very bloody affair. I'm trying to give people a hint. That's not a good hint if they want to find it.
No, well, that's not the only place.
Is it not?
No.
I trust you, but I don't remember offhand where the other place is.
I think I know that he made at least one appearance alongside the last appearance of our beloved dermatologist.
Wow.
Whoa.
They coincided.
Don't summon him, Jake.
Oh no.
How do you undo a dermatologist?
Summoning.
Yeah, we said it 4 times, so that's no good.
Yeah.
You can't undo a summoning. Especially not the joy I bring.
All right, dermatologist, we wish that you would go away and let us podcast in peace.
All right.
I didn't even cost us anything that time. That's great.
Yeah,
That's pretty cheap.
There wasn't some monkey's paw-esque twist.
You have to read The Little Prince again.
No!
Or I will be your ever-present friend.
That's not so great either.
A copy between the frying pan and the fire.
Yeah, I think we're just in the frying pan with the fire. Where were we? Oh, yeah. So Gilead is... I don't like it.
It's bad.
It's bad. It's bad. I mean, especially if you're looking at it for any indication of, where
Christian faith,
where Katherine Patterson's soul is.
Yeah, it's an ungodly book. It's gross.
It's right in line with the big theological conceit of Bridge to Terabithia, which is, of course, that no God would ever send an innocent 10-year-old girl to hell, even if she blah, 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 blah. So
yeah, well, I don't have much else to say about Katherine Patterson. She's still alive, still writing. She's written a lot of books, and yeah,
there really isn't that much more to say about her.
She had 2 winners on the Newbery list.
Yeah, because my list had the nominees. She had the great Gilly Hopkins was nominated but did not win. So she's a fairly beloved children's author, although I'm sure Bridge to Terabithia is her main claim to fame. I mean, you can't just walk up to someone on the street and talk about the great Gilly Hopkins or whatever the other one was, Jacob Have I Loved. Mm-hmm. But you could conceivably find someone on the street who had heard of Bridge to Terabithia, which maybe just means that there's a popular movie, but I think it also means that it's a beloved book that we all grew up with.
Yep.
So that's her. I don't know. So guys, we didn't talk about this beforehand because we were so excited and gung-ho to get in here and talk about these books. Do you want to have the whole Bridge to Terabithia conversation first and then talk about La Petite Prince?
I do, just because they're in separate bubbles in my mind.
Yeah, okay.
Personally.
Yeah,
right.
That's fine.
That's fair. That's totally fine. What's that sound? It's the sound of the plane coming over, indicating baggage check. Part of the show where we say our baggage. We've already kind of spent a lot of time up front talking about some of our children's book baggage, but what do you guys kind of baggage do you guys have with Bridge to B? Or no,
T?
Sorry, Bridge to T. Yeah, B to T.
I don't have any baggage with Patterson or the book itself. I had not read it or seen a movie or anything like that. I guess the only place where you could talk about baggage would be Death and or the Chronicles of Narnia, which are really the only 2 points of contact I guess I have with a book like this.
Right.
So Chronicles of Narnia and growing up, even playing and imagining your own little version of Narnia I grew up loving those books and doing that sort of thing when I was pretty young. So I guess that.
Did you have a magical family of hippies that embraced you and a girl that took you into the woods and made her own fake Narnia for you? Absolutely
not. No such thing ever happened to me. I did have a friend die when I was 12. After school one day, we were walking home. I had said goodbye to him or whatever, and he walked one way and I walked the other, and he got hit by a car. And so that's the thing that happened.
Did you see it or
no? I didn't see it.
Heard about
it. I knew it before I got home though, because people like sounds and things happen. It was like after. It wasn't just after school. It was in middle school, and there was some practice that we were at. I don't know if it was a basketball practice or what, but so it wasn't right after school, but it was after a practice. And so there are enough kids around and just sort of like mingling and going their own way that somebody came running to tell us before we got in too far that it happened. And it was a woman who jumped the curb on, you guys are here now, so Lincoln Avenue, right over by Plaza Park, International Prep School or Academy or whatever they call it nowadays. So yeah. So no, I've got that, and then just the recent sudden deaths in my life.
Yeah, I guess it's worth saying we're sort of in a weird season. So our head pastor back in Bloomington, the church that we came from, is retiring, and any number of older people in that church and people that we loved and had various degrees of relationship with have died over the last.
It's fairly normal for a church to have deaths be a regular occurrence, but this is
our church had just aged up into the place where it was about to become. We were about to start that turnover.
Yeah, so since we've moved here, that's sort of where the church is. And so that's just sort of surreal in its own way. That church experiences a lot of turnover in terms of, because it lives in Bloomington, it's a small university community, so there's a lot of people coming and going.
Right.
And a lot of people in that church are not native Bloomingtonians the way that you would maybe think of your church. They don't have their roots are elsewhere. And so that church is used to, in and of itself, having a lot of just change and transition. So I expected, moving away, that it wouldn't be too long before the church and its people slowly began to be less recognizable. Mm-hmm. But I don't think any of us anticipated was how death would factor into that as well, which that's also where the church is at. And so that's just another layer of sadness. And
yeah, the church was founded almost 30 years ago now by people in their 30s and 40s. And so we've obviously had older people, but as the church has grown and gained momentum, we're just at that point.
That first generation of what were young families at the time are now in their 60s and 70s and 80s. And some of them it's like founding families, but their parents have, came and joined the church. Yeah. And now, so that generation of parents is dying, and then that next generation is aging into a place where it's just closer to death. But yeah, this is a sudden, unexpected death in this book. It's more like what happened with our friend Adam, or something like that, where he
was 43, I want to say something.
Yeah, he was 43, a healthy doctor. So it's different than Charlie, who has cancer or something like that, where you know that something's coming and it's not entirely unexpected. But yeah, so, and the untimeliness of it too.
Yeah.
Right. So my grandfather died of a heart attack that was sudden and unexpected, but he was also in his 70s.
Adam's the one in all of our lives that gets the closest to just that unfair feeling that this book conjures up and deals with pretty well.
Yeah, that sense of this isn't fair, and how do we go back? There's no such thing as normal anymore.
I had deserved and planned on more time with this person, and I relied on them, and I needed them, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, none of this makes sense. This doesn't make any sense. And what makes sense is that I wake up and this has all been a bad dream.
Right.
And I don't know how to make sense of just everything, the disjointedness of reality now.
Right.
But I remember when Brandon died, not our Brandon, but my Brandon, that same sense though, she talks about the desk at school and things like that. And I remember Brandon's desk and all of that sort of stuff. In fact, we all brought things and put it on Brandon. I don't know who started it or where it came from, but we put things on Brandon's desk, and I think they all got taken home to his parents or something like that. And then I don't remember what we did, if we removed the desk or if I don't know, it was weird. It was just a weird thing, like in 7th grade or something like that. I remember being with a bunch of friends at the funeral, and it was an open casket and probably shouldn't have been. And then you're like 12, so you got these 12-year-olds who are just trying to cope with this stuff, but they're saying things out loud that you don't say at a funeral, because there's like 100 public school kids there, right? So that doesn't even look like him, and there's all this sort of thing, like, and it's like his family's there and everything else, and all this like horror. It's just horror. Girls in the corner crying and boys trying not to cry, and some of us were, I wasn't, but some of us were pallbearers, and just like all of it was just like weird.
Well, Ben, what baggage do you bring to Bridge to Terabithia?
Well, Nathan, I read it in, I want to say 6th grade, 5th or 6th grade. And I remember reading it. I remember the impression I walked away with, which I'm just going to give because that is my baggage. my evaluation. I've been thinking through what made it such a disquieting book for me and why I didn't like it, and why I decided I didn't want to read anything by Katherine Patterson ever again. And I think it was, I mean, you guys are right. It captures that weird, jarring, surreal feeling of the death of someone that you love or that you're close to, and how it changes the world. It does do that. But what I remember, and I couldn't have maybe articulated this in 6th grade, is the godlessness of it. Just the idea that Patterson's going to introduce in a religious story, basically, this boy who has a basic kind of harsh form of fake Christianity. You're going to introduce these godless hippies who don't know God, and then you're going to kill their daughter for the major dramatic moment of the story.
And then you're going to paper over it.
Yeah. And I hated that. I mean, I'm not saying I was a mature Christian in 6th grade, because I certainly wasn't.
You're not going to paper over it in terms of how it impacts Jess, but you are going to paper over it in terms of any implications about her. Or
the truth of anything.
Or anything like that. Anything to do with God or reality.
And it really...
And you're gonna bring up hell specifically.
Yes.
You're going to have the little girl be afraid and Jess be afraid that Leslie's in hell. You're going to have the whole scene where she goes to church beforehand, and then have a conversation about hell and about how she'll go to hell if she doesn't believe. And then you're going to kill her, and then you're just going to have the dad sort of dismiss it all. Yeah,
you're bringing it all back to me. That's more detail than I had remembered.
That is what happens.
It's all right. It all sounds very familiar now that you say that.
They bring her to church on Easter, and
I remember
the preacher
this.
talks about hell.
Yep.
And
And Leslie says, "Wasn't that interesting? A new experience of I collect experiences because that's what my dorky hippie family does." And
and I kind of liked it, but Jess is all like uncomfortable about it, and his Maybell or whatever her name is really freaked out because Leslie's going to hell.
Yeah, I hated that. I mean, I understood the comfort of truth and God and submission to His ways on some level in 6th grade, and this book is just like, none of that matters.
Well, also, as we'll talk about with The Little Prince, I think it's easy for a kid to actually have a correct visceral reaction, even when you can't quite articulate what's wrong. Mm-hmm. I mean, for it to dredge up all this stuff and then not only not have cheap answers, but just not really have anything in its chamber to say.
No,
it
felt like it traps you there emotionally, right?
So this is like an interesting little bit of crossover or point of something.
All right.
With The Little Prince, because The Little Prince is all about like adults are stupid and they don't understand things in the most visceral, real way. They don't see truth the way that children see it. But there is this, and we're going to beat the crap out of that book in a minute, as it deserves. But there is a sense in which what Patterson is doing is writing here for adult sensibilities, and not the fact that as a kid, how many kids do you know actually really feel? It takes a lot of hardening and a lot of time to get rid of that sense of your conscience before God.
Well, and if my dad, who ignores me and is a redneck, that is I don't even like my dad. My dad says one thing, that's going to let me let all those thoughts off the hook. No, this is going to keep him, maybe when he's 30, he'll look back and laugh like, ha ha ha, I used to worry so much about my friend going to hell. But this is going to be something that bothers him for a long, long time. And that's just, if you're going to play fair with the characters and the situation and the psychology, that's what you have to do, even if you're not a Christian. You can't dredge it up and then let them off that easily. It's just not true.
Right. And for a Christian kid, especially, reading this book is going to do the same thing to you that it would actually do to Jesse.
Yeah.
I mean, how could it not?
I mean, if for a Christian kid, you actually are stuck with, well, I liked Leslie and
I worried about my friends going to hell. Like, as a kid who barely went to church.
Yep. Yeah.
I worried about, I had made a profession of faith and walked an aisle and prayed a prayer when I was 5 or 6 years old and gotten baptized. And from that point on, I worried about my friends going to hell. And it didn't matter that I set foot in church maybe 10 times from then until I was 17. I carried that weight on my conscience.
Mm-hmm. My wife tells a story. I don't remember the details, but she got in trouble in kindergarten or something like that because she had gotten the notion of hell into her brain and she couldn't shake it. And she had a friend And I can't for the life of me remember the details, but she went and basically assaulted this friend with the notion of, you're going to go to hell, you have to repent. And
there were 2 times where I got so worked up about concerned about particular friends that I managed to get my parents to take me to church so that I could take them to church. It was just one of those things. Like,
I mean, it's torment forever. It's the kind of thing that keeps you up at night as an adult.
And that resonates with your conscience, the
Right.
reality of the way God made the world and the reality of sin and guilt that you've not spent a whole lifetime figuring out how to harden yourself in silence and kill and get distance from.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once I got the taste of like, okay, Katherine Patterson is an author who's going to jar me and give me these gross versions of what I love in some fashion, and then leave me with nothing after dealing with difficult emotional matters. I was just like, nah. I didn't articulate that. I just knew I don't like that lady. I don't like her books. I don't want to read her.
And the relationship with Dad that you brought up is more complicated even than that, because part of the whole thing is the reason we brought in these hippies to be heroes is because Jess has persuasions that his father would think are effeminate.
Right.
And so there's this antagonism between Jess's private life of art and imagination that he has to keep a secret from his redneck dad, who would just want to beat it out of him for being gay or whatever.
Yeah, actually, the stupid pagan modern version would be better. I think if she wrote the version that was just Dad really is like, yep, your friend's going to hell, as he swigs his Jack Daniels, and then Jess is like, no, she's not. That would be a better scene than what Katherine Patterson gave us. And it would be more in keeping with the themes of self-actualization. And I mean, it would be something. I mean, it would be, don't get me wrong, that would be evil. I'm just saying that would be evil in keeping with the way the book's constructed. Whereas this is not only weird, gross, and wicked, it's also just like, why did you conjure this up if you weren't going to if you didn't have anything to say about it, actually? So my baggage with the book is actually my baggage with Newbery books and with Caldecott award winners and things like that. I remember having those books foisted on me and sort of resenting it, sort of having a love-hate relationship with them because I wanted to be a reader. I mean, I read Crime and Punishment in 7th grade, I think I want to say, like, and it all went over my head. I'm not saying I was a genius. I'm just saying I liked to move words through my brain factory as quickly as possible. And so Caldecott was like the kind of thing that I was supposed to like, but I also just had this sense that, well, all the fun books are over here. You know, Jake and his friends are reading Goosebumps, and I have to read like some book about a slave or something like that, or the American experience. Like, so I always resented Johnny Tremaine and Island of the Blue Dolphin and Bronze Bow. I have no fond memories of, even though I'm sure it's fine. I think that one specifically, doesn't he end up interacting with Jesus? Isn't like one of those Ben-Hur type stories? He's like a Judean rebel or something like that.
Maybe. I get it confused with one of those other books like that.
Yeah, who knows? But I sort of resented those books. I also thought of them as weird and kind of like there was a lot of death. Island of Blue Dolphins, I remember her brother just dies or something like that, and then his body's just there and she's stuck on this island. I may be conflating that with another book, but I call it Courage, maybe, is actually the one where that...
Call It Courage is like a fun adventure, boys adventure novel island thing.
Yeah, but I think somebody dies in order to set the plot. I don't know. I just remember in all of these books, the reality of death. I mean, a number of those kinds of books were about slaves. And so somebody would die or somebody would be whipped or something like that. And you would just feel the visceral sort of brutality of it in a way that all my favorite books, your Tolkien's and your Lewis's and your didn't have that. They might have things that were much more grand and terrifying in their way, Balrogs and monsters and vampires and stuff, but also distanced from the reality of actual pain and death. Mm-hmm. Tolkien's full of wonderful grand metaphors, but a metaphor doesn't hit quite the same way as just like, and then he beat his slave, and then someone died and their body looked weird, and you don't have to deal with that stuff in a lot of my favorite books, including a lot of the horror books that I was discovering, because those books are so grandly metaphorical and over the top that as brutal as they are, as grotesque as they are, it's not the kind of brutal and grotesque that you actually encounter in real life. And therefore, I was able to distance myself from it, rightly or wrongly. In any case,
it's not like Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is just incredibly brutal in a totally different way for a kid.
People were miserable and it was hard. And death is hard. And so I lump Terabithia in with that. And it was actually one of my favorites because I don't know. I guess I responded to, I guess I just fell hook, line, and sinker for what Patterson wanted me to.
You can make an argument about the dad and mom both in this book. I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt your flow, but I have something to say about that. That might make sense of whenever
well, let me just finish up. So because I don't think there's much more. I think I really responded, and actually reading it again, I'll admit I still respond to this kind of thing. Secret friendship, going to the woods, making your own little Narnia. I always wanted things like that to happen in my life, and they never did. If I tried to get my friend, like, hey, friends, let's come up with our own Narnia. And they'd be like, no, let's...
No, nerd.
No,
how about we play basketball?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have a lot of friends that wanted to play basketball. I had more of a sense of self-preservation than that. But my friends did not want to go into the woods and create our own Narnia. So sometimes I coerced my brothers into joining me in my imaginary worlds. But the idea of having...
That's what I did with my Narnia.
Yeah. The idea of having an actual...
It was short-lived, but it was only me and my brother.
Yeah, and I can think of similar things with my... But I did have a lot of best friends growing up and deeply intimate relationships, and I wasn't close with my own dad. And so I relied on, in a way that's similar, and in a way that she captures well, I relied on my friends in a way that was much deeper than a kid coming from an actual wholesome family does. And so I think I responded actually to Jesse and Leslie's relationship. And I'm sure that's what we're going to say later is a lot of the stuff that's just pandering and stupid and we don't want to give it the time of day. But I cannot but admit the truth, which is that I responded to it. And so then the death felt doubly unfair and weird and but it also felt fair insofar as I understood that's what the book was doing. And so I actually remember liking this book. I was expecting to begrudgingly like it again and was surprised by how cheap I thought a lot of it felt now, and indeed was objectively. So that's my baggage. And what's that sound? It's the camera shutter clicking, bringing us into the big picture. And Jake, you were just about to give us some big picture thoughts, I guess?
Was I? I was going to make a case. Maybe this is a villain or some Villain's Lair or something like that. Yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
But whatever. I was going to make the case that actually mom and dad make perfect sense. A lot of maybe dad is actually not presented as a bad dude or a redneck. He's presented as somebody who has to...
He's just tired and trying to support his family. And
yeah, he has to work extra hard. And he gets laid off at some point too. And yeah, it's been a while since I've read this book, I have to admit. Yeah. So some of the details are a little fuzzy for me.
No, the thing that...
But so you've got a dad who's distant.
Right.
But not distant because he doesn't love his family or doesn't love his kids. And what death does is prove that mom and dad aren't as bad as Jess thinks they are. Right? You expect them to act one way, and they're actually pretty soft and pretty understanding and pretty sweet with him. And if you are a kid who feels like... I think... If we see it from Jess's perspective, he feels like the family's against him. He feels like mom's out to get him, his sisters are out to get him, and dad doesn't understand.
Right.
But the reality is, dad actually sees some of the artwork and the stuff and knows that he threw his markers or whatever away, and it's like, you shouldn't have done that. You know, that's just not as bad a dude as all that.
No, that's right. I was being over the top when I said that. I mean, the reality is she's got that whole running thing. It's not subtext, it's text, where Jesse's like, I wish my dad would hug me like he hugs my sisters. And then once Leslie dies, his dad actually is cradling him. And
right.
Leslie's like, dad always wanted to hug him. He just had some weird dad hang up or conception of toxic masculinity or something that kept him from doing it.
And nothing was ever quite as bad as Jess wanted it to be. And I think that's part of how we can get if we become too... You see this happen a lot in kids. I saw it in myself as a kid. The more in school I became oriented to my to my peers, to my friends, instead of my parents, the more they had to take on the more I had to have reasons and justifications and excuses for sidelining them.
Mm-hmm.
in my life, right? And so you tell yourself these stories, or you make up these stories that allow you to have some emotional distance so that you can be attached to, latched on to, oriented towards your friends first.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they line up and sometimes they don't, or they line up with the facts or they don't. And then you look back as an adult and you realize, hey, I was just a brat. And
yeah, I kept waiting for this book to have, we should say, Ben's read this book the longest time ago. Jake's read it the second, and I've read it the most recently. I kept waiting for this book to...
But we've only read, within a month or within a couple weeks of each other.
I'm not trying to say you guys don't.
Me, not since 6th grade or whatever.
Yeah, I guess we can admit that. But you have read The Little Prince very recently.
Very, very, very recently.
We'll get to that. But we'll get to Ben reading The Little Prince. Ugh. I kept waiting for it because his dad, his mom, and especially his sisters are portrayed so cartoonishly as just like this oppressive, stupid force of idiots that I kept waiting for the book. Me and Meredith were listening to it together in the car, the first chunk of it. And Meredith was like, who are these people? These people are awful. I don't want to listen to it. And I was like, just wait, honey. It'll probably turn a corner and we'll find out. Every kid sees adults and sees his siblings in a cartoonish way. And, if she can bring this airplane in for a landing, then it's not that the book actually thinks these characters are all cartoons. It's that Jessie thinks they are.
Yeah.
And I think with the dad and the mom, the book does kind of land the airplane. But she doesn't really...
It at least gives them an opportunity, even if you want to say that, no, Jess saw things rightly and they were that terrible. Death creates an opportunity for a little bit of a reset with Jess.
Yeah, which is nice, I guess, as far as it goes. But it doesn't go far enough to actually find any kind of moral spot that I felt good about. I mean, in other words, the book actually is still pro the weird hippies.
Absolutely.
Which I wasn't expecting, actually, as I went back to, I was like, surely there's going to be a turn somewhere in this book where we figure out that Leslie's parents are kind of weird and we have some perspective on them too. The whole coming of age is that we're going to get perspective on everybody. We're going to understand that this sexy teacher lady isn't just a sexy teacher lady. She isn't just an object of desire. She's more complicated. We're going to understand that Leslie's parents have their weird artsy bohemian lifestyle, which has actually caused Leslie a lot of trouble while introducing some broader cultural things to her that are good. But no, Leslie's parents good. Jess's parents and family bad.
Or at least inferior, right?
Yeah, Miss
at best,
Miss Goodbody, or whatever her name is. She doesn't have a James Bond name, but whatever.
Hippie music teacher.
Yeah, she really is just like the awesome. I don't know what the archetype, what the Jungian archetype for her is, but whatever it is, she's that.
It has the flavor of Dead Poets Society, right?
Yeah, and it has all the problems of Dead Poets Society. I mean, it's better than Dead Poets Society because a dog taking a dump on a log is better than Dead Poets Society. But I don't know why this dog is doing this on this log, and I don't care for the analogy, but it's out there now. I can't take it back. These podcasts are not edited. But I think it does a similar thing where it's like, here's the bad guys, here's the good guys, here's the bully who's actually nice, and that you could argue there's some dimensionality there, but no, she was just a good guy. She's just, it doesn't.
Nobody likes her and is comfortable with her because she wears pants.
Right, exactly.
But actually, she's super smart, and all the kids love her and love her class because she actually likes her job and is good at teaching music and makes people feel loved and special, especially Jess, who she cultivates that artistic fire in.
Yeah. And then she takes him on a
magical journey to Washington, D.C.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Well, I guess that was our big picture section. Does anybody have any other big picture thoughts about this book?
No.
I mean, I don't know that I'm going to take us through heroes and villains or anything like that. I mean, do you guys think that the first 2/3 of this novel actually work at all?
No.
They just irritated you? And
yeah.
I don't remember well enough to comment, I'm afraid.
But you weren't so swept up with it that you had any fond memories of it?
Yeah, I really have no fond memories of this novel. So, yes.
Yeah.
No, it's just a bunch of Jess's dad's not home. He's oppressed by the women of his home. And he wants to be the fastest runner ever, and it stinks because there's a girl, and it's the new girl. and everybody speaks in the most hackneyed, so hackneyed fake Southern talk that I didn't even, I wasn't even bothered by it. Like, it was just like...
It just defeated you.
It's just like... What a joke.
Which Jake, we should say famously...
Jake wasn't bothered any more than a pan of cornbread just sitting on a stove.
Yeah, exactly. So we for our fiction shows, we have a character like Chip McGregory who Ben just brought up for us there, kind of. But we have characters like that have kind of some down-home isms. And Jake's always kind of picky about like...
Well, it's all made up out of Nathan's idea of what Hollywood people think that Southern people are like, and it just gets under my skin.
Well, there was one
much.
script specifically where I think I'd just gotten done reading some Cormac McCarthy, and it kind of leaked in there. So everybody had these grand poetic metaphors for everything. And Jake was like, just like, nobody talks like this. My relatives don't talk like this. This is like so... stupid. That sort of thing doesn't bother me as much, but reading this novel, it's like every paragraph is going to have one of those like, Jess jumped higher than a frog in a hailstorm.
And I just think that we ought to be above. I think Southerners are so oppressed by everybody thinking they're stupid idiots who live with stupid metaphors that are put into their mouths, that we ought to be above that sort of thing.
No, I think we can flatter them by writing Cormac McCarthyan poetic whatever for them. But yes, I agree. Yeah. This, I don't know what else to say about the first 2/3 of this novel. It's I like the idea of it still. It corresponds or intersects well enough with my own brokenness and with the memories of my brokenness as a kid, my beautiful brokenness, that I could still relate to it and it can still kind of move me a little bit. But it's the kind of thing where, like Dead Poets Society, I don't like that movie. I don't know if that was clear earlier. Dead Poets Society can still make me cry. And that's one of the things that I resent about it. Like when something successfully manipulates my emotions, but you can feel all the gears turning and you just feel cheap and manipulated and used and you can see all the artifice. It's really, really aggravating. I mean, it's why we all hate that song, that Christmas Shoes song or something like that. Although that one's so lame that nobody actually cries, I don't think, unless they're a loser. But, you know, like a Hallmark movie, or I don't know what a good example is.
Any number of country music songs.
Yeah, any number of country music songs where it's like, let me give this fake wife cancer at the end of the song just so I can make people cry, not because there's anything that I had to say about death or any observation that I had or any real anything, just she was young and I loved her and now she's dead. And it works. Those kinds of things can make me cry. I'm an easy touch.
Right.
But that's precisely why.
Don't take the girl, man.
Yeah. Don't take that's why I get angry at this kind of stuff.
It's such an easy conceit. Like you take a line, I mean, and you can do almost any line. You throw a line out there and all you have to do is make it be about a little girl going through the stage of life. And she did this thing when she was a little girl, and then
now it's her wedding day, and I'm giving her away.
And now she's dying young. You can make it. You can make the wedding day the point of ultimate tears, and you can make it sitting alone in the rocking chair, and she sat alone. That's all you have to do, right? Like the little girl that was happy playing and sitting alone as a toddler, and how cute it was, and then her wedding day came, and you find a reason for her to be sitting alone, but she's the center of attention and it's joyous. Then her husband dies and she's sitting alone on the rocking chair after her grandkids are gone, and then you cry. Right. Such a simple, easy formula. All you can take something that stupid or that simple, and if you just spend 2 minutes putting yourself there, you can make yourself cry thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which doesn't mean, by the way, this is a bit of a tangent, I suppose, but it doesn't mean that art is at its best when it is tackling the periphery of human experience. It does not mean that art should not handle things that are central to all of us, like having a daughter, giving her away at the wedding, falling in love, a loved one dying. Art should primarily, I think, be actually handling those things as opposed to the neurotic things that modern art concerns itself with.
Well, but you have to have something to say.
Yeah, you have to have something to say.
And the point of the country song is, I know that if I take these things and pop them into this formula, that I will make people cry, and then therefore my song will be played on the radio, and I will make money.
Yeah, I mean, all Shakespeare is, all his most famous monologues are things like, why did my loved one die? Why am I here? Why do people die? Why is life hard? It's all really like boringly central stuff. But he's Shakespeare. He has something to say about it. So be more like Shakespeare, country music writers. What are you thinking? Ah, boy. So this novel is silly, and it has a bunch of cornpone junk in those first 2/3. It handles the death scene pretty well as far as it goes. Completely mishandles in a wicked way the idea of Leslie's eternal fate. What else is there to say about Bridge to Terabithia?
Does it successfully normalize the life of art, creativity, and the imagination for burgeoning young artists, male and female alike, Nathan?
No.
It failed to attract me to any of those things, that's for sure.
I mean, look, it's complicated. It's just...
One of my daughters had read this book in a class or something like that, asked her what she thought, and she was like, it's good, it's sad, it's about imagination.
Mm-hmm.
That's her summary.
Aw. I mean, if I was talking to Jesse, like if I met Jesse, and I do meet Jesse's frequently, well, maybe not frequently, but I've talked to and met my fair share of Jessies over the years. When I talk to them, what I say is, okay, Jesse, you've got a talent that's a little bit off the beaten track. You want to be an artist. So here's what you do. Get a job that your dad approves of and work twice as hard as everybody. That's your goal in life. It's a little bit like I'm a larger fella. So what they tell you if to be fashionable is you want to overdress a little bit when you're a big guy, because if you just wear the same, like Jake can just wear a t-shirt and everyone will think there's a fit trim guy in a t-shirt looking good, Pastor Jake. I wear a t-shirt in the wrong context. People think, look at that slob in a t-shirt. And it's because they have certain pretty accurate assumptions about what it means when a fat guy wears a t-shirt generally. I think it's exactly the same thing for people who have an artistic temperament or want to do artistic things. They need to go out of their way, actually, to work twice as hard to prove that they can live a responsible life, especially if they're men, that they can do things like make money, hold down a job, and make something with their art. I'm not taking any of that away from Jesse. And insofar as people wanted to take him away in this phony baloney parable, those people are dumb. He should be able to draw, but he's got to take the complicated path of figuring out how to integrate that into a responsible adult life. And that actually is the real path of the artist, as opposed to all these phony baloney paths that Hollywood shows you, where it's just like, everybody doesn't want you to be an artist and you have to follow your dreams. Nobody ever got anywhere by following their dreams.
Except under a bridge, homeless.
Yeah, except under a bridge, homeless. I don't remember what the question was, but does that answer the question?
Well, I was just thinking about my daughter's summary of the book being, it's sad and it's about imagination. And that's just something we have in and of itself. I'm sure that the way her teacher taught that book was trying to be inspiring about the life of the imagination and creativity and the arts and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I like imagination, and I look back fondly with the times in my life and that when I had space in my life as a kid to just wander off. There was like woodland behind our house, and I would walk into the woodland and I would tell myself stories and I would make up things and create whole worlds in my head. I wouldn't go back and take any of that away from myself. I loved that. I loved having the time to dream. And insofar as I have things in my life, spaces in my life where I can still go there, I love it to this day. I don't like the idolatry of it, and I think it's hard to escape the idolatry of it. And so I don't know whether your daughter's teacher was good or bad.
I do.
I'm guessing bad, though.
Yeah.
How would we quantify the difference?
I mean, we have a whole season of Chip and Lance because of this teacher. So.
Right. Well,
that teacher.
But if you listen to the season of Chip and Lance, the moral is imagination has to be combined with discipline and self-discipline, just like anything else.
And in the service of truth.
And people have such an idea that they're that they're in conflict with each other, that they just can't handle that. They're like, oh, you want truth and you want discipline? That must mean you don't want imagination. It's like, no, I really want imagination. The world needs more imagination, which is why we need imaginers to have discipline and have truth, because that's what's going to unleash their imagination.
Yeah. It's all the pagans who actually have a work ethic,
right,
that end up foisting their imaginations on us all.
Yeah. And that's too bad. And it is the Christians who are like, a world of imagination, who end up working as accountants somewhere or something like that, because they could never make it work. They weren't willing to actually, if they don't end up homeless under a bridge. So I don't have any patience for the false opposition, the false conflict that people create between imagination on the one hand and truth and discipline on the other. I actually think it's imaginers that like to tell that particular story, that like to create that. I still can't find the word I'm looking for. That like to create that false antipathy.
Well, it's
because it makes them seem special.
Mythologizing.
Yeah, right? Exactly. It's like, I was special, I was different, and you can be too if you're.
I was repressed.
Except you can't.
Except for you can't, unless you're willing to work really hard. I don't know. You just see kids especially who are so enamored with this idea of, I'm just going to give myself to imagination, and it usually doesn't go anywhere because they don't have any discipline. So yeah, I like going into the woods and making up stories. I think it's fun. I think it's cool. I think an honest look at the real Jessies and the real Leslies of the world would ask a lot more difficult questions of who they are and why they're this way and where's it's going to go. Like, are these people going to remain friends? Actually, like, what happens when one of them actually has a sexual awakening? Like, there's so many perfectly reasonable questions you could ask about these characters that the book has no interest in asking, because it just wants to create its own little hermetically sealed mythology, which is in some ways true to how Jesse would be experiencing it
and how he would treat it post facto after she died.
Right. But Jesse's wrong. He's a dumb kid, and there has to be a way for a book to acknowledge this. I've just, for whatever dumb reason, because I hate myself and hate life, I've been listening to The Awakening by Kate Chopin or whatever.
Oh, you do hate your life?
Yeah.
That book stinks.
Yeah, a horrible feminist, like one of the great feminist works, right? And it's about a woman who cuts ties with her boring, humdrum, bourgeois husband and goes on an adventure with an affair. And having an affair with a man, you see what I'm trying to say? And I compare it in my mind, of course, to the great book about those things, which is Anna Karenina. And it's like, what's the difference? The difference is not actually that Tolstoy can't evoke the excitement of the affair, the adventure. Like, Tolstoy actually gives you everything that's good, everything that's enticing about Anna and Vronsky, but then he makes her pay a price. And even before she pays that price, he's able to just subtly provide enough perspective that you understand Anna's point of view is not Tolstoy's point of view. And he does it without ever seeming judgmental or harsh. He's very compassionate towards Anna Karenina. He understands where she's coming from, but he also understands she's on
the hell that she made for herself and the hell that she's headed toward.
Right. And that's what Katherine Patterson should have done. Like, okay, here's how Jesse thinks about it. And this is from his point of view. I'm not going to do much, but just subtly here and there, I'm going to give a little perspective. And how she does that is her own business. But the fact that she doesn't do it is my business, because I had to read her stupid book and it was stupid. Any other thoughts about...
No, I think we're in the right mood for The Little Prince.
Yes, we are. We're getting ourselves worked up. Let's see. I don't need to take us to the Hall of Heroes, the Villain's Lair, the Crawlway of secondary characters, Twist and Turns, Salon of Style, or the Haven of Reflection upon Deeper Meaning. I think we've already
covered all that stuff. Yeah.
Can I just talk about Mrs. Goodbody, or whatever her name is? I hate that character. What a horrible conceit. Like, the idea that she wants to take Jesse on this sexually charged day trip to
The National Gallery.
The National Gallery, which I've been to, and Patterson does a nice job of describing it and making me remember what's so awesome about it. And I could imagine an afternoon with Mrs. Goldberry would be wonderful. But even as a kid, I was like, who is this character? This book is supposed to feel timeless, but we suddenly have a hippie in here. Like, I recognize this. This is hippie stuff. I don't even know what that is, but I just know that's who she is. She's singing all these like Woody Guthrie songs and stuff like that. I have nothing to say about it. I just wanted to heap a couple extra spoonfuls of scorn on it. And speaking of scorn, let's go into everyone's favorite novel. And by everyone's favorite novel, I mean a book that we all three sincerely hate with the passion of 1,000 suns. And how many suns worth of passion do you hate Bridge of Terabithia, would you say, Ben?
Sun is awfully passionate. Let's just be...
What light source would you compare to your despising for Terabithia?
I don't know. Sorry, I'm not good at this. I hold it in my cold fluorescent gaze.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I switched metaphors on you.
No,
actually,
that's fine. So a fluorescent light source.
Just like this thing.
I would compare it to that famous light bulb that's in that police station that just never goes out. Like, I'm always going to hate this book. Yeah, it's fire department. That's right. Mm-hmm. But it's a faint hatred. Like, I don't, whatever. Bridge Terabithia and me, we're not friends, but I don't think about her too much. But Jake, what light source would you compare your hatred of Terabithia to?
Nightlight.
A nightlight.
It's insignificant, and you don't really think about it unless you either need to use it in a rare circumstance or you're annoyed by it because you want to sleep and want zero light.
Right.
So I don't hold it against anybody who was a kid who somebody handed them this book because they lost a childhood friend and it helped them understand themselves a little bit better or what. Mm-hmm. And so it has a little bit of specialness for them. But I would never give it to a kid who experienced that sort of thing. And I don't know why I'd give it to anybody else.
Me neither.
So.
All right. Well, we move from...
I mean, if she didn't do the damage she did with...
the hell thing.
The hell stuff. Then it could be a great thing to give this to a kid.
Just somebody else has gone through this and...
Yeah, and you don't understand it, but you'll feel seen and understood and heard, and...
That would be a different book, for sure.
Yeah.
Even with its other flaws, it would still be...
it could have been a book that said to a kid who doesn't even know how to believe that anybody could understand or relate to what they're going through, an adult that says, no, I get it. I see. I understand. I've been there. I know someone who has. And that could have been really cool. And those aspects are the reason that it got the Newbery.
Yeah, but I bet it just feels like somebody has to have written the actual good book. It has to exist. I bet it exists. I bet there's a great book for kids about a friend dying. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, or maybe even on the bottom of my head, but I bet it exists. Speaking of things that exist, La Petite Prince.
Yes, sir.
The great French classic of horror. Boy, Ben, you're going to provide us with some much needed context on...
Boy, howdy.
Le Prince.
Oh, yeah.
Antoine de Saint-Exupéry.
Antoine de Saint-Exupéry.
And can you pronounce his name like that every time?
Yes, maybe. So, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. He was a really famous French writer and aviator. He did a lot of stuff as a pilot. So forgive me.
If he didn't write The Little Prince, he would still have some fame.
It seems like he would, although if he wasn't a writer, I don't know that he would, because he's famous for writing about his life as a pilot.
Okay.
And for writing, there's a book called Wind, Sand, and Stars that won the U.S. National Book Award, actually. That's about, it's like an autobiography or a memoir of certain years when he was a pilot, mixed with sort of philosophical reflections, a la certain things I'm going to guess that we see in The Little Prince. Mm-hmm. I'm going to guess that there's some similar ruminations
some enlightenment.
About the desert and humanity and loneliness and suicide and whatever. So he had a famous writing career. He's extremely famous in France, a bestseller, and a sort of hero in France. And he died in a crash, cause unknown, mysterious circumstances that's provoked a lot of people writing to figure out what happened, or if someone shot him down, or
if he
suicided.
That was the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he's mostly known for writing that kind of stuff, nonfiction. He was a journalist as well. The Little Prince, I think, is his only foray into children's literature.
I believe that's correct.
And it's the most famous thing he's written. I don't know. Has anyone else ever heard of his other works here, apart from The Little Prince? Certainly I haven't.
I haven't.
No.
Yeah. There's a book, not a book, sorry. There's a movie that I feel like, Wings of Courage is an IMAX film. Which
is that about him?
Uh-huh. Which I've heard of. Yeah. And it's about him.
Interesting.
I've never seen it. I could tell you more. I will tell you that he married, then this will figure into The Little Prince. He married this lady, a Salvadoran lady named Consuelo de, what was her original name? Because now it's Consuelo de Saint-Exupéry. But it was Consuelo de something. And
is she his little rose under the...
Jake, how did you guess?
Ni Susan de Sandoval.
How could you guess? I don't understand.
And so he has the guilt of multiple affairs and misunderstanding her...
Jake, I feel like you're just
her manipulations
guessing.
And
you're just guessing about things that may or may not have happened in his life. But in fact,
all over the page.
Wikipedia confirms that all those things did happen. So Consuelo Sunstein, it is amazing. Yep. So she was a very intense and short lady with, quote, a viper's tongue, unquote. I don't know where that quote is from. I guess that's him, but Wikipedia doesn't attribute it. It just puts that in quote marks. So it's pretty fun. The viper's tongue. And yeah, so he would leave her and return and leave her and return. They had a stormy relationship. They both had lots of extramarital affairs.
If he had only appreciated that she was his rose.
Mm-hmm.
If
knowing that she was among the crowd of women made every woman special. That's why he liked to sleep with all of them.
Not a very admirable man. Let's just say. So he flew in the French Air Force at more than one point. I'm sorry, I'm just not going to give a very good summary of his life. I think I'm basically done. So he's, anyway, war hero, literary hero, children's literature hero. He's all those things. He matters a lot in France.
Well, that tells you everything you need to know about France.
There you go.
Or him mattering a lot in France tells you everything you need to know about him and his work.
Yeah. Take it either way.
That was mean towards French people.
That's pretty mean. Right.
He did actually have a plane go down in the desert and was stuck there.
Thanks. Yeah. I forgot to mention that. Yeah. So and almost died, was rescued. He and his friend, his aircraft mechanic, were rescued by a Bedouin on a camel before they died of thirst. And and then what? The Little Prince. When was that published? Blah 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 blah. The Little Prince.
During the war.
Sorry, I have a lot of little Terabithia. Open. It's all mingling together in my mind.
It looks like 1943.
There we go. 1943. Sold an estimated 140 million copies worldwide. Translated into over 301 languages and dialects. Oh. It's been a radio play and a stage play and a movie. A couple of movies. Television. It's been a ballet. It's been an opera. This thing is just everywhere.
People really connect to it. I mean, you cannot... It is undeniable, but we're going to do our best to deny it today. Yeah, the only other thing I would add is it's important, I think, to understand that he was a French aristocrat kind of in the time period. I think he was born 1909, died in 44 or something like that. So, or maybe he was born in the late 1800s. But either way, he's kind of in that same weird bubble that people like to watch their Downton Abbey and stuff, just the kind of last of the aristocracy as the world changed in the 20th century. And I don't know why I think that's important. I just think that knowing this book was written not by a commoner makes some sense of some of his daffy ideas about his version of the Little Prince is the best thing you could say is it's the romanticized vision of a child that someone who'd never had a child or interacted with them might have. I think you could say about a lot of his satire and a lot of his portrayal of who's good and who's bad and who's the working man and all this kind of stuff. It just feels like someone who has a lot of notions and maybe actually hasn't had any real experience with, say, a gaslighter or a businessman or a drunkard. But anyway, what's that sound? It's the sound of the baggage plane going by again. Yes, that's right, folks. Over the years, it's morphed into not just the plane that reminds us that planes have baggage and therefore we're going to give our baggage. It's actually the baggage plane.
The baggage plane.
The plane
that carries the baggage.
Carries our baggage.
Drops it onto our heads.
Drops it onto our heads.
That's cool.
And so, Jake, what baggage did you bring to Le Petit Prince?
So the first time I read this book, there was a grad student in IU's Jacobs School of Music from Geneva, Switzerland. And his name was Willie. And he was hanging around our college ministry. So I was a college pastor at the time. And he was hanging around our college ministry. And he liked to get together with me and talk about life and God and philosophy and art and whatever. And he was a really sweet guy. And so I have any number of souvenirs, like really cool things from Geneva, like this copy of this letter that Calvin wrote. And all these stories about how you used to actually be able to get like any number of letters that Calvin wrote, just like to purchase because, or because they were used as scrap, like just paper was paper. And so there's all these like little things floating around that anyhow, I have this beautiful framed letter that Calvin wrote somebody and some pretty postcards of things in Geneva. And it's all because of Willie, but Willie maintained that The Little Prince was his Bible, and he bought me a copy.
Oh no.
And so he was just like, yeah, if you want me to read the Bible and come and listen to you read the Bible, you need to read my Bible. My Bible's The Little Prince, and we'll talk about that too. So my first time reading The Little Prince was so I could talk about it with Willie. And
so to do full justice to The Little Prince, you were primed to be antagonistic, probably.
Yeah, I was not reading it as children's literature. I was reading it as the kind of thing that somebody who's in their mid to late 20s at this point, because he was a grad student, so somewhere in his mid 20s, who thinks of himself as an artist and a creative person, would look to as his sort of like the thing that most encapsulates his worldview, his way of thinking, his way of looking at the world, his way of approaching life and everything like that. So that was how I read it. And I hated that book so much. Then I thought it was gross and that it fetishized kind of childhood innocence that didn't exist, and that it tried to make suicide romantic, and that it was a weird sort of Gnostic nihilism that I just hated that book. I hated it. And turns out it's still all those things, and I still hate it.
Well, yeah. Ben, same question. Baggage?
It was around my house. I feel like maybe it was read to me by my mom. I don't know. But I can't really remember just reading it as a kid. I remember seeing it and picking it up and looking at the illustrations and then not reading it. So I don't know when I actually read it for the first time. Maybe just a few years ago. So, yeah, I was aware of its existence. I didn't have any good or bad associations with it, really.
Well, I had nothing but bad associations with it, even though I don't think I'd ever read it until we got to this podcast. But there is as Wikipedia puts it, I just looked it up, a 1974 British-American sci-fi fantasy musical film with screenplay and lyrics by Alec J. Lerner and Frederick Lowe. Lerner and Lowe that's My Fair Lady, I think, isn't it?
Sounds right, yeah.
I mean, they're one of the big ones, whatever else they are. Yeah. My Fair Lady, among other things. So those guys are heavyweights. And yeah, that's right. Directed by Stanley Donen, however you say his name, famous for Singing in the Rain, Seven Brides, Funny Face, Charade, really classy golden age of Hollywood director. But this movie just got put on by my parents as a children's movie, and it's profoundly slow and ponderous and just exactly, you can imagine not just this book, but this book adapted by people in the 1970s coming out of the 1960s. So it's so weird and kind of hippy dippy and just that style of filmmaking where you suddenly zoom in on somebody's face. I don't know how to evoke it. What's something that everybody's seen? I don't know, if you've seen Breaking Away or something like that kind of grungy indie film feeling of that time. So it's just really weird. And it has this all-star cast that bring all these characters to life. And so you have Bob Fosse, famous for choreographing Chicago and Cabaret and all that stuff, plays the snake. And what happens is the little prince will come across one of his animal friends or flower friends, and then that thing will turn into an actor. So he'll meet a flower and we'll just see a flower, and then the flower will start to talk to him, and then the flower will just transform into an actress, and she'll just be in kind of a white flower costume or whatever, and she'll talk to him. So the little boy meets the snake. The snake is first just a snake, and then transforms into Bob Fosse, famously very sexual dancer dude. I mean, if anybody's ever seen Chicago or these sorts of things. And Bob Fosse does this long, seductive dance, and he's wearing this black or green leotard or something, where he sings this song about, I'm just a snake in the grass.
Wow.
I'm a snake in the grass. And as a kid, I was just what is this? This is creepy and weird and kind of boring. We've all probably had that experience where you just stumble on some weird movie that your parents are watching and you just can't make sense of it. But then Gene Wilder, of all people, plays the fox. And Gene Wilder, I mean, we all love Gene Wilder. Everybody loves Young Frankenstein. Everybody loves Willy Wonka. And I'm not arguing with that. But there is something about Gene Wilder that you don't want to misuse. Because, for example, if you have Gene Wilder talking to a little boy about how the little boy needs to tame him, and Gene Wilder is bringing all the kind of bathos and sort of sentimentality that he brings to Charlie, at the end of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, when Charlie, you passed the test. Imagine that version of Gene Wilder talking to a young boy about how I'm a fox and you need to tame me. And it was just it's pretty pedophilic feeling. It's just why? This is such a miscalculation. Even if you like the book, you cannot literalize it like this. You cannot take something that's sort of wispy and ephemeral on the page and just give it to actors. There's good books. This is a horrible book, but there's good books like that where just the act of making people actually do it so profoundly throws off the equation that it just something that's charming suddenly becomes horrific. But anyway, this movie is just one giant miscalculation like that after another. And it's long and it's boring and it's weird and it's creepy and it's stuck with me. I haven't watched it probably for 30 years and I still remember the snake in the grass. I still remember the fox.
The Princess Bride's that way, right? We talked about that sort of thing. I was just racking my brain. There are things that happen in The Princess Bride that if you made it as grounded as it actually is in the book, it would lose its... So that one example would be Wesley actually slaps
Buttercup.
Right. But you can't have him do that in the movie in order to maintain the feel of the book.
Right. But having him just raise his hand and then say, I would have slapped you, actually does the same job. It's a smart adaptation in the movie. Yeah, exactly. But Little Prince, it's just let's just have a man playing a fox talk to a little boy about how he needs to be tamed. It's wow. Maybe in animation, as we're going to argue, no, there's no way this book is garbage to begin with. But even giving all benefits of the doubt, it's this was the wrong way to do it. So it's really stuck with me. And it's kind of has this weird, maybe I'll save some of this for the big picture because I find this book to be pretty creepy. And not in a, I want to make a point about the weird things that the author's doing it kind of way, but in I actually feel kind of weird and put out. We all listened to this book this morning. I guess that's you guys needed to catch up with it. So we just sat down, we turned it on. It's only a couple hours. we just listened to it. And it's like by the end, I have that weird feeling in my toes and in my fingers, like I do when someone's being cavalier about death, or when someone's describing a corpse or something, like, or when someone's talking about necrophilia or something. Like there's certain things that just make me feel clammy, make me feel weird. And by the end of this book, I just have that feeling. So I'm bringing us into the big picture, I guess. What's that sound? It's the sound of camera going off, bringing us into the part of the show where we talk about the big picture of the book. So big picture thoughts on The Little Prince, gentlemen.
I mean, I've more or less given my big picture thoughts and my baggage, but if you'd like me to repeat them.
Please, we can't say it enough.
I think this book fetishizes a kind of childhood innocence that isn't real because it's twisted and perverted in how it's framed throughout the course of the book. I think it tries to romanticize suicide in a weird sort of quasi-spiritual, Gnostic, Buddhist kind of
throw off this shell. And
yeah, so you've got this whole conceit that, what's the quote? You can only see things
truly with your heart, not your eyes.
Yeah, because essence is never substance, or some weird thing like that, right?
What matters most is invisible or something.
Yeah, I think that's actually a direct quote. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you have, like, the reason it works for people is because that conceit that, okay, the little prince has a flower.
Right.
And he thinks it's super special until he comes to Earth, and then he sees 1,000 roses that look like his rose, and he realizes it's not special. But then the fox comes and demands to be tamed, and then he realizes a thing becomes lovely because it's yours and you've owned it.
Right.
And that's just like this weird sort of thing that happens. And then that, like, brings his love back around for his rose, because it's his, and he loves it and it loves him and he has owned it. And so now it's special. And all the little parables of the men who try to count the stars so that they can own them.
But they don't actually.
But he owns 1,000,000 stars because he owns one.
Right.
And once he's dead and gone, our narrator can own the laughter of 1,000,000 stars because he knows that his little prince is on one.
He owns the little prince. I mean,
and he owns the little prince. So it's all this sort of like the way it's supposed to work in terms of magic is sort of like re-enchanting you with the wonder of the world and of the beauty of.
Have you ever just stopped and looked at a flower?
Exactly. It's like that kind of. It's that kind of thing. It's like a way of bringing romance to everything, and part of that romance is a weird, perverse sort of ownership. But it's not like there's something that's real. Like there is a sense in which, as a kid, there's no tree like the tree in your backyard, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's no tree like the tree that you grew up climbing, and a kid can see that and see the beauty and wonder in that tree where he sees 1,000,000 trees everywhere else. It's not his tree. And I can think of the trees I climbed at my grandparents' house or whatever,
right,
as an example of that exact sort of thing. Or the time on the beach when I was on vacation with my parents, and my mom picked up a shell and handed it to me, and I thought in that instant it wasn't special, and so I threw it. And the instant I threw it, I regretted it because it was special, because it was the one my mom picked up to give to me. And then I had to look for it. There's little things like that happen as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
That he's trying to capture or encapsulate, that bring a sense of like wonder and beauty to the things that those reviled grown-ups,
the much reviled grown-ups
don't understand or don't see. But it's hard to put your finger on exactly what's off.
Well, I think I might have a way into that, because I was afraid, because I remember we did our discussion of Alice in Wonderland, and there's the weirdness, there's the extreme weirdness of what's his face, Lewis Carroll's actual story. That's pretty creepy. But then also the book just gave us bad vibes. And was it just because of his backstory? No, I think at least one or two of us didn't know his backstory, but just knew the book felt weird. But I felt weird about it, talking about it at the same time, because I was like, it's one of those things that you just kind of feel and you can't put your finger on, and to try and put your finger on it as a podcast. How do you even begin to do that work in a wholesome way? But I wanted to be able to be a little bit more specific in our evisceration of The Little Prince. So I was inspired. I got done reading The Little Prince. I've now read it twice in preparation for this stupid podcast, but I got done with it the first time. And the first thing I thought to do is I thought, what does the word fetish actually mean?
Yeah.
And I looked it up, and the first definition is actually an object. A fetish is an object such as a small stone carving or a carving of an animal believed to have magic power to protect or aid its owner. So it's actually an occult word. And it's just, it does actually tie in pretty nicely to Jake's seashell. It's like the seashell just had some power for Jake. More broadly, a material object regarded with superstitious or extravagant trust or reverence. And then the second, we still haven't gotten to the sex stuff. The second is an object of irrational reverence or obsessive devotion. And then the third definition is an object whose real or fantasized presence is psychologically necessary for sexual gratification, and that is an object of fixation to the blah, blah, blah. So I think where that might help us is, of course, we all imbue things with reverence. Of course, a stone can symbolize your relationship with your mother, or a seashell. There's nothing particularly creepy about that. But if you push past that into something that's actually irrational, into something that actually becomes worshipful of the seashell, something that would actually disregard your mother in favor of the seashell, that's where it becomes a fetish. And I can't tell you exactly where The Little Prince crosses the line, except for to say that the entire book crosses the line constantly. It's like we always have this, not just a reverence of what we see as a childlike wonder, but an irrational reverence, an irrational fixation on what it means to be a child, on his golden hair, on his laugh,
on the beating of his heart pressed up against my chest.
Right.
The thing that you can't get around, and maybe going here will help us even come back to that concept, because fetish is the word, fetishize is the word. And I don't think that there's a better word for what this book does, how we talk about it. I mean, those other definitions are really helpful.
It puts it on a spectrum where you can say it's not quite, do we think it's outright sexual? I don't know, but it's on that spectrum somewhere.
Well, it certainly is in love with death.
Yeah.
And the one thing that we shouldn't allow anybody listening to this to get around is the fact that the little prince commits suicide. That is exactly what happens. And if you want to argue that in this fantasy world, that's not what happens, but he's magically transported to his asteroid B6374290, whatever.
Through suicide.
Yeah.
It's through suicide. He has a snake who's going to poison him. He's afraid that it's going to hurt. He's warning you that it's going to look like he dies and that he's not going to be able to take his body with him. He has listened to the snake. He has believed the snake, and the snake is going to poison him, and he's going to be magically transported in spirit to his home asteroid while leaving his body behind.
The snake is sympathetic to his pain. The snake is like, I solve all riddles. The snake is like this really creepy. I don't know. It almost reminds you of other snakes.
I know. It's like he chose the snake for a reason.
That really does put the finger on it, because it's like if he dressed his metaphor up a little bit more, I think we might still be disturbed by it, but we might also give it something of a pass. Like if it was just an angel that showed up and was like, I'm going to magically transport you, and it felt like a death metaphor, but also he felt the need to disguise it. But the fact that he felt the need to go as far towards making death deathy, towards making the serpent serpenty. I mean, the serpent says, I can send you on the longest journey. I can send you back from where you came from. That's like a really disturbing.
All right.
And I'm going to do it by biting you and injecting my venom in you. And your friend, I won't have enough venom left.
Well, that's what how the Little Prince reasons about it.
But the point of the detail is that this is not magical. It's that it's real.
We want this to come as close to feeling like death while also connecting with our big, broad fairy tale metaphor. But it's not much of a metaphor. We want it to be like a snake bit him on the ankle and he fell over and he died. and his little heart stopped that had been beating, was not beating because a scary demonic snake bit him.
And convinced him to let him.
And he had to get away from his adult sort of guardian person. Like, don't follow me. You don't want to be here. This is creepy. The narrator feels unease about the snake. It's
okay, because it's just a metaphor. It's all an allegory for his relationship with his inner child. I mean, come on, can't you see someone arguing that?
Yeah, I can. I'm trying to think of my own counter argument that's not totally sick.
Oh, I think that you could win by leaning into it if you wanted to buy that, because there is a sense in which actually that is what this is. It's just about this guy's inner child and how he reconnected with his inner child in the desert and thought about the people the woman, the rose that he loved and wanted to reject, and how she was special to him, and realized that I guess that part of him needs to die somehow in order to keep living. I'm not really sure what to do with that, actually, but I just know that
it feels as much like atonement. Like,
yeah,
as anything else. It's like, I have trampled on this rose and I've left her vulnerable by going to seek 1,000 other roses, and I left her uncovered, and all she has to protect herself are these 4 stupid little thorns, and there's no way back now, actually, except death. There's no way to go back from what I've done except death. There's no way to be reunited with her except through the eternal bonds of death. And it's like this weird atoning kind of. That's how that's how I read it.
It does feel that way.
That's how I read it, not knowing the backstory. That's why I told you what his backstory was.
Right.
It's just like
that's
the kind of story that you write if you're plagued by guilt about having trampled innocence and misunderstood it, and now you feel like there's no going back except to death wish. Right. And it's like this sort of like, if you write this story, maybe you can die enough of a symbolic death through it that your lover will at least accept.
Well, that's another thing about this, though, is what matters. The invisible stuff is the stuff that's actually symbolized. It's an imagined reality. It's like memory. It's what these existentialist, nihilist people always want to do in their fantasies, is they want to create a literary, symbolic world that stands in for every spiritual matter and every matter of eternity, and say, this is what will last, and this is what will transcend me, is the memory that I leave behind. That's what the Little Prince gives the narrator as a parting gift. This memory of him that imbues all the stars with this deep meaning. And that's what literary people think eternity is. That's their substitute for spiritual reality. And that's what this whole book is, just that.
Yeah, you're making me think of, for whatever reason, I've encountered this line a lot in TV shows and things lately. The line, something's not valuable because it lasts. Something's valuable because it doesn't last. which I can enter into most atheistic and existential things. I have enough sin in me that I can sort of be like, yeah, cool. But that one has never made any sense to me. Like, I just don't get it. I don't get what's romantic about that. It's romantic because it's going to break and die and decay, and you have to find some quick value before it does.
It's precious because it's fragile.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds good, but no, it's not. I like things that last.
You don't like flowers, Nathan?
No, I don't. I don't like flowers. Maybe that's my problem with this book. Well, I was telling Ben over lunch today that this, of all the books we've read, I defy you to name one Bookening book that it would be easier to, without altering any major plot point, just simply changing the tone a little bit by a few degrees, to make into a horror book. I mean, it is so close. I crashed my plane in the desert, and a weird little sexualized boy with golden curls came walking out of the desert and wanted to be my friend, and had a relationship with a snake that he was going to go back to. I mean, it's just like, I feel like I could write that in an afternoon. I could take this book and I could twist it into a profoundly perverse and wonderfully terrible horror story. It's so close. I mean, I don't think you could name another Bookening book that we could. If you're gonna make Pride and Prejudice into a horror book, you gotta like change the plot.
Add zombies.
Add zombies, exactly.
And then at the end of the story, the boy leaves the eternal memory of him, the unshakable eternal memory of him with the narrator who's out of his gourd.
Yeah. I mean, it really is.
And he can never look at the stars again.
That's
without
right.
abject terror.
Absolutely.
No, it's just love. It's not quite Lovecraft because he was too cosmic, but there's a school of vampiric literature that's really close to this. I could probably find short stories and things that are basically just this story. I met a beautiful young.
Well, vampiric is right?
Yeah.
That is the vampire story. That seduction of there'll be no going back, and it will be through a perversion, but you will attain a kind of perverse immortality.
Right, and because there's no real immortality, we have to embrace the perverse immortality. That's because that's all there really is.
Yeah, and then you turn it into a romance, and you have Twilight.
Yeah. Well, and the melancholy, beautiful person who's stuck within a beautiful shell, but contains worlds and universes is just that's. I mean, Edward is the stupid version of that, but all the great vampire stories have that. If anybody remembers Interview with the Vampire, you had the Kirsten Dunst, the beautiful little girl who got turned into the vampire, and then over the centuries was just stuck as a beautiful girl with golden curls that everyone saw that way, but her innocence had been despoiled. So this book is just, there's that aspect of the horror, and then actually even the Little Prince on his planet. Maybe this is just what I remember from the movie, but it all has a vibe that reminds me of nightmares that I've had. Just the feeling of weird loneliness, the inability to connect with people, traveling from one bizarro, surreal situation to another one where you have a single conversation with someone, like just being on a little planet with nobody else except for one person. It's all kind of nightmarish. It all kind of feels like Charn in Narnia. There you go, Christian nerds, if you want a handle for it. It has that kind of weird, eerie, where are the people? Where are the relationships? Where's the hustle and bustle of life? It doesn't exist in this book at all. Even when he gets to the city, he's going to individually encounter these little parable figures, and they'll have these cryptic conversations. I just feel like any number of it's not even so much nightmares, but just my dreams will often be I'm wandering around in a desolate place, and there's one person, and they have some weird meaning that I can't quite grasp, but I'm going to talk to them, and then I'm in a different place, and then I'm in a different place. But what I'm not is with people. What I'm not is connected to things. But I'm not exaggerating when I say, like, when I was a kid, I remember the pastor giving a sermon about hell or something like that, or about death. And I remember my fingers and my toes going numb with just the reality of, like, for whatever reason, that's like the visceral body reality that I have, where I'm like, death is a thing, and my hands and my feet go really clammy if I get into that mindset too deeply. This book does that. And it's not because it's about suicide. It's because it's quite successfully seductive about suicide. It has that feeling of, for me, maybe I just connect to this book more, but it has that feeling of like being on a high place and knowing that you could jump. It's like the serpent is out there for every one of us, and all we have to do is find him, and then we can shed our shell and transcend.
And atone for...
Like, let's not pretend this book is bad at what it's doing. This book is amazing at what it's doing. That's what makes it so
potent.
Like, it's pretty.
That's why there's brilliant 25-year-old musicians who call it their Bible.
Yeah, that's why people keep making movies. Never did bother watching that Netflix thing. Don't think I will. No. It'd be interesting, though, to see how much Netflix felt the need to sort of clean up what feels weird about this.
I don't know. They did 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah. Well, the answer to that might be not at all, but it would just be interesting to know the answer.
Yep.
But yeah. And even apart from the suicide, even apart from the stuff that's really bad, there's just the irritating stuff where he describes the worst type of person. Like, he just describes like a dumb idiot. And then he's like, adults are like that. It's like, no, we're not. We have imagination. We don't just like to count stuff all the time. Let's not bifurcate the world into kids are awesome and adults are stupid. How about this? There's a lot of kids that are only interested in
a bunch of stupid kids.
Yeah. I was a kid once. I remember kids. There are some kids that are only into the things that are going to get the material gain. There are kids that are selfish.
How many kids games devolve into mine, yours? parse things up and count. Like, kids are just as petty.
Right. You can find an analog in the kid universe for the king, for the drunkard, for the businessman.
Well, the little prince isn't petty. He just doesn't answer adult questions.
Yeah, he's
the kind of kid that we would all love if we met him. We'd be like, do you want to eat some pizza? And he'd ruminate and he'd stare off into the sky and say, once I had a meal that I loved very much.
Now draw me a sheep.
Would you like pepperoni on your pizza? A sheep! Draw me a sheep!
You could not be more spanked than you are right now. Little prince. It's just like, what an irritating kid. Yeah. I don't know. Did we like any of the planets that he went to and the little parables about how stupid everyone is and how dumb everyone is? No. Okay.
I don't think so.
But Jake, didn't you feel like you nailed your propensity to
light that lamp?
Light that lamp because of orders or whatever?
Nope.
I will say any one of those vignettes probably would be fine if they were positioned in a totally different book that didn't bring
context matters.
Yeah.
It really does.
This book is so smug that you don't want to give him many of his points, but I can imagine a book where the specific part I can imagine being good in a good book is the part where he's like, on Earth, there are 7,000 lamplighers, 20,000. Like, that's kind of cute in a twee, annoying, precious way. It's kind of cute, but not in this smug book. All right, let me see if I want to take us to any of the other. So I don't know that we need to go to the Hall of Heroes.
Nope.
I don't think we need to go to the villain's lair.
Nope.
I don't think we need to go to the crawlway of secondary characters. What about the twists and turns? You guys want to talk about all the twists and turns in this masterpiece?
Nope.
What about the Salon of Style?
The style is magnificently artful, and that just makes it worse.
It is, although it commits one of those mortal sins that drive me away from any book, which is when people adopt this kind of twee, winking tone.
That draws attention to itself.
Hello, sort of children, I'm talking to you. The adults can go somewhere else. Like when I was a kid, I did not like people that talked that way to me. I did not like that aunt. I did not like that teacher, the person who had their magical, all right now, class.
But you did like it when C.S. Lewis talked to you, but he never did it in a way that made you feel patronized.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. Saint-Exupéry, or however you say his name, is being so condescending, actually. He's assuming that he has to flatter me and tell me how stupid adults are, whereas C.S. Lewis is just like, hey, kid, here's something you might not get, or here's some piece of information you need. And it feels kind of the same if you're an idiot, but if you can tell the difference, then you're not an idiot. How's that for critical analysis? Well, I remember me and Jake editing this article for the old Warhorn magazine that was supposed to be addressed to kids, and we just could not get the tone right. And we actually had different people take a hack at writing it, and I think Jake did a draft. I think Jake actually did the final draft. I did a draft. It is really hard to figure out what the right tone is when you're writing something that's supposed to be addressed to kids. And some versions that were written in good faith just ended up being so la-di-da, children. It's hard to do, actually. It makes you appreciate somebody like C.S. Lewis who can just nail it and make it feel absolutely effortless.
Yeah. Or Kipling at times, although Kipling fell into the same trap, I guess, sometimes.
Yeah, but I'll take it. I'll take Kipling.
White?
Yeah, E.B. White. E.B. White just writes good. He just writes good.
He's just good writer.
He's just good writer.
Yeah,
and
he's great.
If you just be a genius, then you don't have to worry about this problem, in my opinion.
Well, you also
be a good writer.
Yeah, just don't try to write for kids. Just try to write a good story, and you can maybe use different vocabulary. But
just make it simple.
Right, make it as simple as a June bug on a pile of grits
in July.
In July.
Wow.
See, now, if we were doing that to the Brits, we could get away with it. Because the Brits are used to being flattered in their.
You mean if we were making them
Yeah, there's certain to me, the reason I hate that stuff so much is it feels like punching down.
Right.
And that's what everybody does is punch down on people from the South.
Right.
But it's punching up to do it to Brits.
Right.
And so slipping into your faux exaggerating.
I say.
They deserve it. And they can take it. Right.
I think there's something to that. Or maybe you just shouldn't try to write too much in a dialect unless you actually have a real affinity for it or mastery of it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, or unless you're Mark Twain and
can just do it.
People will like it whether they like it or not.
Right. Mark Twain had the advantage of just hating absolutely everyone from every class and situation. So that helped. Ben, what other deep thoughts do you have about La Petite garbage?
Oh, just that it wants to be childlike. It's just childish.
Yes.
It is in the end. It's just about that feeling you had like with Jake's shell. Like you get weird and precious about things. The idea would be to outgrow that.
Would it now?
And to cling to things that are actually precious and let God define reality for you and not just think that, well, that shell is precious to me because it was precious to me and it's my special shell and it will always be precious. And the whole ocean is tinkling with laughter because I threw my shell in it once that my mother gave me. Well,
that's actually an immature, a very special time of life for.
Yeah, I was 4.
Teen?
14. Yeah, I remember feeling that way as a kid about every little thing sometimes. It's just crazy. But even that way of prizing people and thinking about old friends you used to have is not. You have to think about them the way that God does. You have to learn as much as you can to give to think of things with the proper weight and value. Anyway,
which doesn't mean you can't have a trinket or something that
of course
isn't
not
meaningful. But
yeah,
again, you could just twist this story a little bit and make it good by having some perspective on it. If he was just like, yeah, the Little Prince feels that way, but we as readers aren't supposed to. Maybe we can even find it charming, but because we're laughing at him a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the joke always has to be on the hero one way or another. That's the problem with maybe both of these books, is that it flatters you, the reader, by putting you in the position of the hero and then making you right and awesome and everyone else kind of stupid and lame. Certainly the Little Prince much more than Terabithia.
Mm-hmm.
But you really want your fiction to discipline you by proxy, by letting your hero have some real flaws. And I don't know that either one of these books does that successfully. Maybe Terabithia kind of tries.
Well, I think another reason this book is weird and bad is because it tries to mediate this really twisty stuff about jealousy and pettiness and sex and romance through childhood innocence. Like the Little Prince is not a kid at all, actually. He's got this weird romance, dysfunctional romance with a rose. And I don't know, it's just a weird set of tensions and problems.
If you want to do Saint-Exupéry or whatever, what is his name?
Oh, no, I like Exupéry. Go ahead with that.
If you want to do Exupéry, the benefit of saying he wasn't a pedophile, then the next best thing is that he never actually met a real kid and only read about them in Charles Dickens novels.
I guess.
I mean, I keep... This is a really... I hesitate to say this because it just seems heavy-handed. But what if you took this story and just put a dad in it? Just like a dad that you could respect. Doesn't it just change absolutely? Like the story as it is, this prince, this kid as he is, and now take your favorite father figure from any book and just insert him into...
Like he's the pilot.
Yeah. Like take the pilot, get rid of the stupid pilot who for some reason is ready to orient his whole life and worldview around a child, right?
That's a sign of his wisdom, actually.
Yeah, and put in, and I don't care who it is, put in freaking Gandalf.
I was just gonna suggest Gandalf.
Like
fool of a prince.
And I was gonna make that joke, but you got there first.
I mean, he's just gonna be like, okay, shut up. Now let's figure out a way out of the desert.
And look, can the dad character learn something about whimsy and magic and...
Sure, that can be part of the story.
Yeah, there's a good way to tell that story too. But let's not just let the prince get away with being one of the worst brats this side of Charles Wallace in terms of bookening books.
Charles Wallace is worse.
Well, Charles Wallace didn't actually commit suicide. I think we sort of wanted him to. Is Charles Wallace really the biggest brat we've ever read about? Nah, the biggest brat we've ever read about. Because doesn't Kathy in East of Eden start out as a little girl and she's already
a psychopath?
A psychopath. She's probably the biggest brat we've ever read about. But the Little Prince is right up there.
But not the biggest brat that you were supposed to respect.
Yeah, Kathy's like, sometimes people are monsters. Kathy was one of those.
So Steinbeck says, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is like, the Little Prince is sickening. Charles Wallace is annoying.
Yes.
And categorically, it's just weird.
The Little Prince
even try to
kind
compare
of
them.
beats you into submission. Like, okay, this is the conceit of the book. I have to go a little ways with it if I'm even going to finish the darn thing. Whereas Charles Wallace is just kind of there on the sidelines being obnoxious, and we're wishing he wasn't there making his avocado toast or whatever. Well, is there anything else to say about this book? I mean, I'm trying to think if let's imagine we have a listener who's sympathetic to this book. Can we construct a sympathetic reason why they might be sympathetic to this book? I don't know that I can, actually. I think this book is pretty wicked.
If you're sympathetic to this book, it's because in a way that is not in love with death or the death and grossness of it all, it's because it did something to awaken your imagination. And guess what? There's a world of better books out there to do that. So,
well, and even if you're a crusty adult that just needs to be reminded to smile when your kid brings you a drawing to put on the fridge, there are better books for that too.
Mm-hmm.
We've read some of them. I don't remember what they are, but I remember reading a book, and in our discussion, Jake being like, and I was reminded that when my kid brings me a dumb flower, I should be happy. That's something that's happened on the Bookening. Maybe a super fan can tell me where, but I like imagination and stuff. I just don't like the Little Prince. And I like to imagine he got bit by that snake and he just died, and his body rotted and his flower wilted in its loneliness. Because that would be a better ending for this book. Ben, how many stars out of 1 billion do you give to the Little Prince?
I should probably give 100.
And are they laughing? Are they laughing?
They're not laughing. They're kind of...
You just own them.
Kind of grim faces, but they're there.
And how many broken ropes do you give to, out of 9, do you give to Bridge to Terabithia?
That's not okay.
Sorry, I ate both these books. How many... what's a Terabithia? How many Terabithian crowns out of 1,400 do you give to Bridge to Terabithia?
1,400? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to adjust your rating system here. I guess I'll give it 50. I can't tell if that's really mean or really generous. So we'll say 50.
50 crowns, not 50,000.
No, 50.
You said out of like 1,400.
1,400. So 50 is not generous.
That's like a percentage point. I mean, that's not
it's
much
not very nice. That's probably a little too far. Bad.
Jake, how many stars out of 1 billion do you give to The Little Prince?
0.
Yeah, I think is it the worst book we've read on the Bookening?
Yes.
In terms of a book that's actually like, hey, you should commit suicide. I don't think we've ever read anything that's gone that far.
No.
Or even close to that.
No.
What's the second worst book we've ever read?
See, we didn't finish Blood Meridian, but A Wrinkle in Time, Ready Player One, there's nothing like that combines the trite with the philosophically evil. Like, I just can't think of what.
I mean, Blood Meridian's full of brutal atrocities, but nobody reading the book is going to be thinking that they're anything but
brutal
atrocities. Yeah.
And there's like also Cormac McCarthy's a genius. Like, there's just not. There's not any. I can't imagine what even comes close.
I should revise my rating to 0 stars in the galaxy, I guess. It's
A Wrinkle?
fair. No, because none of those books have the craftsmanship to make something evil go down that way, right? Even if they're foolish.
Yeah, Wrinkle in Time is just kind of dumb, I guess. It's just kind of stumbling around.
In the hands of a child.
Yeah.
I don't know, Reddit. There really isn't anything comparable. It really is just like, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at every single thing we've read and really try to...
I mean, there's only been a handful of books that we haven't liked, period. And I think we've named them mostly. We've had bad luck with children's books. We didn't love some of the Jungle Book stories, but we did love some of them. Blood Meridian, we famously stopped reading. Gilead, we had concerns about. I mean, I don't know. Till we have faces?
Maybe.
That might come the closest for me.
In terms of danger.
I mean, sorry, Jay and Katie, but just in terms of, I'm going to very evocatively talk about some stuff that's very spiritually dangerous and make it very seductive.
I think Gilead is a spiritually dangerous book for the right person.
Yeah.
You've read it?
I've read it.
So I didn't finish it, but I didn't feel quite that way about it.
I would just say it presents a parasite version of Christianity that masquerades as Christianity. It's like not, but it wants to suck you in. And I think it does a pretty good job of that, actually.
And in that sense, I think you could make a good argument that it's one of the more destructive books. Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, if you're talking about books that go so far, I mean, and ultimately present a false gospel, I mean, you can make an argument for one of our favorite books on this show.
East of Eden?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think that most people reading East of Eden, well, I got to be careful how I say that. One could argue that no one takes a gospel away, but then one could also argue that one just absorbs a complete gospel from East of Eden and that it's very potent.
I mean, I think it's something to be careful with. I think the difference would be East of Eden has some helpful things in it and some good and some drama that rings true. But Gilead is actually just lying.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't think that they're the same. Gilead is a beautifully written lie. I mean, insofar as you like her prose, but she's a good writer for what she is.
Yeah, Steinbeck might think he attempts a gospel with Timshel and all that, but does he?
He certainly attempts one. That's like the whole point is American myth making on a gospel Carl Jungian level. Like that's the goal. And for somebody whose only goal is catharsis, it's about, I can't recall reading a more cathartic book.
You know, I've never regretted anyone reading East of Eden, even friends of mine who are more immature. I feel like we're usually able to work through it and say, hey, that was really cathartic, but also understand there's more to life than catharsis. Like if you just think viscerally, like what book would you hand somebody? I think
I don't have hardly any hesitations handing somebody East of Eden.
And even whether I agree with Ben's assessment or not, I'd be careful about handing somebody Gilead.
Yeah.
Which I think I do agree, by the way. I'm just saying for the sake of argument.
I haven't thought, I'm just finding words for these thoughts. I haven't evaluated it quite that way before, maybe.
I'm just going through our book list to find the books that we really hated. I wasn't a big fan of Murder on the Orient Express, but whatever. Till We Have Faces. I mean, I'm sorry. I know it's a controversial opinion, but I don't think Till We Have Faces is anywhere near as evil as Little Prince, but I think it might actually be the only other thing we've read that's in the running. Let's see here. Harry Potter. Great Gatsby.
I mean, I guess if we're going to do Dennis Johnson this year, Dun Cow?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that we ever quite figured that one out. Yeah, there's an argument to be made for Dun Cow for sure.
Dun Cow is so weird.
I feel like Dun Cow, for all the skill with with which it's wrought, it's not going to actually penetrate to someone's heart. Like it's not good enough to be as bad as some of these other things.
Yeah, I don't think people who read it even know what it means.
Yeah, I think people are just like, what? Why did Mondo Cunny Dog have to get eaten by worm? That was weird.
Dangerous Laughter.
There's an argument to be made for that. But I think that it just feels...
Martin Dressler.
I would say with both Dennis Johnson, if we read him later this year, and with Dangerous Laughter.
The Moon and Sixpence.
I mean, for all those things, any Christian of sense is going to be like, well, this seems kind of evil. Like they're not actually going to be seduced by it. Or if they are, they're going to see themselves be seduced by it. It's not.
Waiting for Godot.
Yeah, those books aren't trying to get past your defenses in the way that The Little Prince is.
Mm-hmm.
Or that Do We Have Faces is, for that matter.
Midnight's Children. Yeah, I just can't.
Yeah, there's nothing that really comes close. Guys, we have the matter of our patrons. They need to be shouted out.
Oh, I've never done this. Well, actually, I've been part of this a couple times.
Yes, sometimes you've been like just caught in the crosshairs of Ben's in the room. Why don't I say the patron, and I'll alternate between the two of you guys, and you can say whether they're a businessman, a drunkard, a king, a
lamplighter.
A lamplighter. Are those the choices? Or any other character. Just assign them a character from Little Prince. A snake.
I mean, you know what I want to say, but I would feel like it would be a betrayal.
What's that?
Oh, nothing.
I feel like that would be a betrayal. All right. Robert and Ronald the Lovebirds, Ben?
Lamplighter.
Cool. Maybe they're all lamplighters.
Yeah, they're probably all going to be lamplighter.
That's exactly what my plan was.
You know, let's trash these stupid books. Let's not do anything from these books. Just name a character from children's literature that you think these people are. The Artful Anthony Dodger and Bootstrap Betsy.
The Artful Dodger and
Bootstrap Bill from the Pirates.
Bootstrap Bill, yeah.
From the Caribbean movies. Wow. Little Anthony's Cigar Store.
Wilbur, the pig.
The little toaster that could is the next one.
The Immortal Chelsea E is the little toaster that could.
Yeah.
Jimmy Beam and
Brave little toaster, I think we call it.
Yeah, the little toaster that could. Jimmy Beam and Little Annie Oakley.
Charlotte.
Lily of the Valley.
I was going to that well, and he beat me to it, and it hurts my feelings.
Hey, there's still Louis the Swan.
I love Louis.
Charles Wallace.
Andrew and Esther the
Who
Lovebirds.
did I give that to?
Lily of the Valley.
I'm sorry, Lily.
Andrew and Esther the Lovebirds.
What's the name of the rat in Charlotte's Web?
Oh, Henderson or like...
It's not Henderson,
no.
It's Templeton.
Go Templeton.
Templeton.
Hey, Henderson made you think of it.
Templeton in the best way.
Yeah.
Andrew and Esther.
Yeah, you're not a stereotype of a certain race. Andrew and Esther the Lovebirds.
Bilbo Baggins.
The Keith Master.
Chanticleer.
David's Mighty Men Trucking.
That should have been Chanticleer. Whoops.
Optimus Prime.
John and Jill, Little Baby Max.
The little family of mice in the Book of the Dun Cow.
Yay! Jay and Katie, who are cold, love cheese, and also C.S. Lewis, including Till We Have Faces.
The Pevensies.
Nice. Fairy Princess of Wonder and Happiness, Mother Beth.
Bilbo Baggins.
Already said.
I said that, you dork.
Let's see. Thorin.
Council Prime Adam.
Winnie the Pooh.
Nathan Not Me.
Piglet.
Ryan the Red Avenger and Judith of the Ladies of Justice.
Paddington Bear.
DJ Sammy G.
Christopher Robin.
Benny and Danny Tiberius.
Tigger.
Eric and Catherine from Yon Window Breaks.
Kinga and Rue.
Professor, the greatest characters from that franchise. Professor and Lady X.
The Very Hungry Caterpillar.
Lavender's green, Dylan, Dylan. Lavender's blue, lavender's green, Dylan, Dylan. I love you too.
Tom Bombadil.
Noah Constrictor.
Ka.
Maricheap.
Reepicheep.
The Fair and Fragrant Maiden Chloe.
Maid Marian.
Ben, you gotta take it back.
I'm not good at this.
Anthony, who is cold and hates life, liberty, the pursuit of cheese, and Brick Red.
Johnny Tremaine.
Well, the reason Jake's good at it is because he clearly has a list pulled up from some... Ooh,
I didn't think that he did, actually. I think Jake's just good at it.
All right.
I just decided to clear my mind and do associations.
Jiu-Jitsu Jeffrey, the Texas Ranger.
Boffer.
See, the problem with associations with some of these is like, well, you led me one direction, then you led me to Walker, Texas Ranger, and now I've got Chuck Norris.
Yeah. Midnight Ninja Ellen.
Biffer.
Return of the Jedediah.
Bumper.
J-Brack and Ruin.
Philly.
Timothy the Rider at Dawn.
Killy.
Oh, Jake, you gotta take it
my
back.
goodness.
Eric and the Kate the Camp Champ Kings who are warm and love bees.
Atticus Finch.
Matty Matt Man.
Scout.
Batman.
Sweet Jamie Sunshine.
Jim.
Oh my goodness.
Tyler,
You're just a parasite.
Correct.
Tyler, the Keeper of Eternal Darkness, and Laura, the Keeper of Eternal Light.
Tom Sawyer.
Cold Steel Cody.
Hook Fan.
Jacqueline.
Correct.
Jim.
Exactly.
Jacqueline the Librarian
do.
Barbarian.
Mrs. Frisbee.
John Bombadillo Bombdiggity, and Captain Tennille, his mate.
The Rats of Nim.
Definitely not Tom Bomb.
Saxophone Alex.
Sherlock Holmes.
The other saxophone Alex, and episode Danny, of course.
Hercule Poirot.
That great children's character. Ryan, the Terror of Texas, and Eric of the Green Crimson, who no longer is stuck in the
Poirot.
cold. Oh, boo. Please send cheese. The Mouse on the Motorcycle.
Radigan.
Ben Solo and Kylo Ren.
Ben Solo.
That's not really literary. John, the Cosmic
He is
King
now,
of
I
Chaos.
guarantee
Smaug. Matthew, the Mind Flayer. Roll of Thunder. Here,
Bard.
Bard.
Of Lake Town.
Annie, are you okay? Get your gun. Ramona and Beezus. Flight of the Valerie.
Hermione Granger.
Oh, that's a untapped well. Thor.
Harry.
Ragnajosh. Steven.
Neville. Ron.
Pegler Dumbledore. Christopher the Flower Hulk.
Snape.
All right, Ben, you gotta get back. Lady of the Crystal Lake.
Malfoy.
Professor Sprout.
Ian the Dotherberry and Lord
Hagrid.
of Death.
Hagrid.
Emily Nightshade, the Haunter of Dreams.
Luna.
All About the Benjamin.
Cho-Chin.
Mysterious Phantom.
He shall not be named.
Jeremy the Dark
George.
Lord of Death, and then his brooding bride, Maya!
It's already George.
Remains of
Sirius
the J.
Black.
Abram, the Puller of Teeth, and Sarah,
Minerva
the Teether
McGonagall.
of Pole. And a new shout out to our friend who had to reach out twice to remind me that he should be in the shout outs, so I apologize to Trenton.
Merlin.
Well, I know, but what's
Merlin's beard.
first we have to come up with a cool name for Trenton.
Oh.
He's like joining the ranks
I see.
here. So what are we going to call Trenton? Trenton Le. What's like a cool French sounding like?
Le Mort de Trenton.
I kind of like Le Mort de Trenton. Why not? Le Mort.
The death of you.
La Mort de Trenton. I mean, are there any other famous French phrases we could work Trenton into?
Why the Trenton?
Why is it French?
Well, Trenton's last name, I won't say on air, but Trenton's last name kind of sounds French, so it puts me in a mind of French. Trenton de Lune, or
Antoine de Saint-Trenton.
Pepe Le. Well, I think
The Count of...
C'est la Trenton.
La Vie Trenton.
The Hunchback of Trenton.
The Hunchback of Trenton Dom. All right, Trenton, do you like La Mort de Trenton or the Hunchback of Trenton Dom better?
Wow.
Or the Count of Trenton Cristo?
Account of Monty Trenton.
Trenton, we don't usually give choices, but if you'd like to choose between La Mort de Trenton, the Hunchback of Trenton Dom, or the Count of Monty Trenton, then please hit us up with hashtag La Mort de Trenton, hashtag the Hunchback of Trenton Dam, or the Count of Monty Trenton.
Fleur de la Cour.
Fleur de la Trenton.
No, that's his character.
I already gave him Merlin, though.
Yeah, but you were wrong. It had to be French and from Harry Potter, and I pulled it. So
Ha ha ha! Merlin from Le Mot de Arthur.
Well, we didn't know you were going to start speaking perfect French.
Oui, oui.
Yes. All right. Goodbye. That's the end of the show, folks.
No.
Yes.
No.
Lumiere sure did want to seduce that broom, or whatever she was.
Feather duster.
And it's a reference to Singing in the Rain at the same time.
Huh.
Always was.
Yeah, and just Maurice de Chevalier. Anyway, goodbye, folks.
Goodbye.
Bye.